The fat bride broke her husband's fingers on their wedding night, then climbed into the wrong black SUV with blood on her hands, and found the most feared mafia boss in New York staring back at her like she had interrupted a funeral. Kalista Hawthorne had expected her first night as Mrs. Thatcher Kensington to smell like roses, champagne, and expensive perfume. She had expected soft city lights through the windows of the Manhattan penthouse, quiet music from the reception still floating somewhere in her head, and maybe one polite little argument about how soon they could leave for their honeymoon. She had not expected screaming. She had not expected blood. She had not expected her new husband to raise his hand against her before the wedding cake had even been cleared from the ballroom. Only 3 hours earlier, everyone had called her lucky. The guests had watched her walk down the aisle in a gown that hugged every curve she had once been taught to hide, and they had smiled the careful smiles rich people wore when they were deciding whether a woman was impressive or embarrassing. Kalista had felt those eyes on her shoulders, her waist, her hips, her round face beneath the veil, and she had lifted her chin anyway. Her gown was ivory satin, fitted and bold, with pearl buttons down the back and sleeves that shimmered softly whenever she moved. Her lipstick was deep red. Her earrings were diamonds borrowed from her grandmother. Her smile had been sharp enough to make the whispering aunties look away first. She was fat. She was fashionable. She was a Hawthorne. She had learned a long time ago that if the world wanted to stare, she might as well give it something worth staring at. Thatcher Kensington had looked perfect beside her. Of course he had. Kensington men were raised to look perfect in public. Tall, pale, polished, with blonde hair brushed back from a face that seemed made for portraits and charity boards. His family had old money, or at least they knew how to act like it. Their townhouse had oil paintings, their country club had rules older than most states, and their relatives spoke in soft voices as if loud emotion was something only poor people suffered from. For months, Thatcher had treated Kalista like a rare business merger wrapped in romance. He sent white roses. He praised her father's company. He kissed her hand in restaurants. He told her she was different from the thin, cold women he had grown up around. Warmer, he said. Realer. A woman with substance. Kalista had laughed at that because it sounded like a compliment that had lost its courage halfway through, but she had wanted to believe the better meaning. She had wanted to believe she was entering a family where elegance meant kindness, not just good lighting. The reception had been held beneath crystal chandeliers in a private club overlooking Central Park. The Kensingtons floated through the room like swans trained by lawyers. Sterling Kensington, Thatcher's father, gave a speech about tradition, loyalty, and the honor of joining two respected families. Lenora, Thatcher's mother, sat beside him in pale blue silk, smiling whenever people looked her way, and lowering her eyes whenever Sterling touched her arm. Kalista noticed that. She noticed many things. She noticed Aunt Coraline corrected the waiters without moving her lips very much. She noticed Thatcher drank too fast after her father, Garrison Hawthorne, joked about looking forward to seeing the Kensington work ethic up close. She noticed Sterling's smile tightened whenever anyone mentioned business. But weddings were strange things. Every family had nerves. Every rich family had secrets. Kalista told herself not to build a mystery out of manners. By midnight, the party had softened into its final expensive blur. Guests kissed cheeks. Cars arrived under the awning. Photographers packed away their lights. Thatcher's hand stayed at Kalista's lower back. Not painful, but firm in a way that began to bother her once she realized it never really relaxed. The penthouse was waiting above the city, a wedding gift from Sterling and Lenora, though Thatcher had explained that the deed was complicated and old family properties were never simple. Kalista had been too tired to question it. Her feet hurt. Her cheeks ached from smiling. Her hairpins felt like tiny weapons against her scalp. All she wanted was to take off the gown, wash the makeup from her face, and breathe in a room where no one was judging how much space she took up. The Kensington penthouse sat near the top of a glass tower on Fifth Avenue, high enough that the city below looked quiet and obedient. Inside, everything was cream stone, gold fixtures, tall windows, and furniture that looked too expensive to sit on, honestly. The rest of the Kensington family had come up after the reception for one last private toast. Kalista had not loved that, but Thatcher said it was tradition. One drink, one blessing, then everyone would go. Aunt Coraline kissed Kalista's cheek with lips cold as a spoon. Sterling called her daughter with a warmth that somehow never reached his eyes. Lenora squeezed Kalista's hand for 1 second too long, then let go, as if she had remembered someone was watching. Kalista went into the bedroom to change. Her maid of honor had already gone home. Her mother had cried herself tired. Her father was downstairs arguing with the driver about whether anyone had packed the leftover cake. So Kalista stood alone in front of the mirror and slowly unbuttoned the gown herself. It took patience. It took twisting her arm at an angle that made her mutter several words her grandmother would not have approved of. When the dress finally loosened, she stepped out of it, like she was stepping out of a very beautiful trap. Underneath, she wore a silk slip and bare feet. Her hair fell heavy around her shoulders as she pulled out pins one by one. For the first time all day, she looked like herself again. Tired, flushed, still glowing a little despite everything. Then came the first shout. It was low enough that she almost ignored it. A man's voice from the living room, hard, angry. Then came a crash, sharp and ugly against all that marble. Kalista froze with a hairpin between her fingers. Another voice followed, a woman's voice. Not loud, not dramatic, just frightened in a way that made Kalista's stomach turn cold. She grabbed the nearest robe, tied it over the slip, and opened the bedroom door. The hallway outside was dim. The penthouse smelled like champagne and white lilies. Somewhere in the living room, Sterling Kensington said something she could not quite hear, and then there was the sound of skin hitting skin. Kalista moved before thought could slow her down. The living room was full of people, and no one was moving. That was the part she would remember later. Not the broken glass on the floor, not Lenora bent near the edge of the sofa with one hand pressed to her mouth. Not Sterling standing over her, face red, silver hair disordered, cufflinks flashing beneath the warm lights. What Kalista would remember was the silence of everyone else. Aunt Coraline sat in a velvet chair with a glass of brandy in her hand. Thatcher stood near the bar, jaw tight but body still. Two cousins looked down at their phones. One elderly uncle stared out the window as if Manhattan had suddenly become fascinating. Lenora's lip was bleeding. Kalista crossed the room. "What are you doing?" Every head turned toward her. For one strange second, no one answered, as if she had spoken in a language the Kensingtons had never been forced to learn. Sterling straightened his jacket. "This is not your concern." Kalista looked at Lenora. The older woman's eyes were wet, but not surprised. "That hurt worse than the blood. Lenora, come here." Lenora shook her head almost invisibly. Thatcher stepped forward. "Kalista." His voice was soft, warning soft. She ignored him and reached for Lenora's arm. "Can you stand?" "Kalista," Thatcher said again, sharper now. "Leave it alone." She turned on him. "Your father hit your mother." His face changed, but not in the way she expected. There was no shock in it, no horror, only irritation, as if she had spilled wine on a rug. "My mother is fine," he said. Lenora gave a tiny sound that might have been a laugh if it had not been so sad. Kalista stared at him. "She is bleeding." Aunt Coraline set her glass down with a gentle click. New brides are emotional. "It is a very long day." Kalista looked at her. "Did you just call a woman getting hit an emotional misunderstanding?" Coraline's eyes cooled. "You would be wise to lower your voice." "I would be wise to do a lot of things," Kalista said. "Tonight has not inspired me." Sterling took one step toward her. "You are in my home." "Noted." Kalista said. Horrible place. Something moved across Thatcher's face then. Embarrassment. Not because his mother had been hurt, because Kalista had made the room feel ugly out loud. He grabbed her wrist. It was not the hardest grip she had ever felt, but it was the first time he had touched her like she belonged to him. That alone was enough. Kalista looked down at his hand, then slowly back up at his face. Let go. Thatcher smiled thinly. You do not understand this family yet. No, she said. I'm starting to. Stay out of it. This is family business. The words landed in the room like a locked door. Kalista stepped closer, still holding his gaze. I became family 3 hours ago, darling. Terrible timing for you. His smile vanished. The slap came fast, faster than dignity, faster than thought. His palm cracked across her cheek, turning her face to the side. The room went still. Not shocked still, waiting still. As if everyone wanted to see whether the new bride would cry, apologize, shrink, and become manageable. Kalista's cheek burned. She touched it once. Her red lipstick had smeared faintly against the side of her hand. Then she laughed. It was not loud. It was not cheerful. It was the kind of laugh that made Thatcher's eyes flicker, because he suddenly understood he had reached into a box without checking what lived inside it. Oh, she said softly. You thought that would work. Thatcher tried to pull his hand back. Kalista caught it. She had grown up with 3 cousins, 2 horses, a father who believed daughters should know how to throw a punch, and a grandmother who once broke a man's nose with a silver serving tray during a charity auction in 1978, and never apologized. Kalista twisted Thatcher's wrist, stepped in close, and bent 2 of his fingers back until something gave with a small, sickening snap. Thatcher screamed. Aunt Coraline rose from her chair. Someone cursed. Sterling lunged forward and stopped only when Kalista lifted Thatcher's broken hand higher and made him gasp. Listen carefully, she said, her voice calm now, almost sweet. I am not one of your little porcelain women. I am not here to be slapped into manners. I am not here to become quiet because your family confuses cruelty with tradition. And if anyone in this room touches me or Lenora again, I will start breaking things that do not heal straight. Thatcher was breathing through his teeth. You crazy. She bent his fingers another inch. He went silent. Kalista turned to Lenora. We're leaving. Lenora looked at Sterling first. That old fear rose in her face like a ghost that knew the house better than she did. Sterling spoke through clenched teeth. Lenora will stay where she belongs. Kalista smiled at him. That sentence just aged you badly. She moved to Lenora's side, wrapped an arm around her, and helped her stand. Lenora was trembling. Her silk dress had torn near the shoulder. There was a bruise darkening at her jaw, one that had not come from tonight. Kalista saw it, and a colder understanding opened inside her. This had not started at the wedding. This was older than Thatcher, older than her engagement, maybe older than most of the people pretending not to see it. Thatcher bent over his injured hand, pale with rage. You walk out that door and you are finished. Kalista looked back once. Her cheek was still red. Her robe was crooked. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. She had never looked less like the polished bride they had ordered. She had never felt more like herself. No, she said. I think I'm just getting started. She took Lenora through the private elevator, while the Kensingtons shouted behind them. Their voices followed like smoke, until the doors slid shut. For a few seconds, neither woman spoke. Lenora held a napkin to her bleeding lip. Kalista pressed the button for the underground garage and tried not to notice that her own hand was shaking. I am sorry, Lenora whispered. Kalista turned toward her. Do not apologize to me. You should not have seen that. No one should have seen that because it should not have happened. Lenora closed her eyes. You don't know what Sterling is. Then tonight seems like a great time to learn. The elevator descended in a smooth, silent fall. Outside the glass, the city flickered in gold and white, careless and alive. Kalista's wedding ring felt suddenly heavy on her finger. She twisted it once, then stopped. Not yet. First, she had to get Lenora safe. Then she could think about the fact that her marriage had lasted less time than most dinner reservations. The garage doors opened to cold concrete, low lights, and rows of black vehicles. Kalista had no coat. Lenora had no shoes. Somewhere above them, the Kensingtons were probably calling security, lawyers, doctors, or worse. Kalista pulled Lenora forward, scanning for the car Thatcher had said would be waiting. Black SUV, tinted windows, Kensington driver. There were several. Which one? Lenora whispered. I married into a family that thinks personality is a disease, Kalista muttered. Of course all their cars look the same. Footsteps sounded behind them. Kalista did not wait. She hurried to the nearest black SUV, yanked the rear door open, and helped Lenora inside. Then she climbed in after her, slammed the door, and said, "Drive." No one drove. The car was too quiet. Kalista looked up. A man sat across from her in the shadowed back seat, one ankle resting over the other, one hand wrapped around a phone, his dark eyes fixed on her with the calm attention of someone deciding whether she was a problem or a gift. He wore a black suit without a tie. His hair was dark, touched with silver near the temples. His face was handsome in a severe way, all sharp lines and controlled patience. Two men sat in the front seats. Neither moved, neither asked who she was. That somehow made it worse. The man across from her looked at Lenora's blood, then Kalista's flushed cheek, then the red mark on her hand. "You are not my meeting," he said. His voice was low, smooth, dangerous, without needing to prove it. Kalista stared at him for half a second, then looked out the window at the garage. Behind them, the elevator doors opened. Sterling's voice carried across the concrete. She turned back to the stranger. "Do you plan to help a bleeding woman, or are you going to sit there looking terrifying for recreational purposes?" The driver's eyes widened. The man across from her did not smile, not exactly, but something changed at the corner of his mouth, small and unwilling. "Who are you?" "Currently," Kalista said, "a bride having a very bad evening." "And why are you in my car?" "Because all rich men buy the same funeral-looking vehicles." This time, one of the men in front coughed, as if laughter had attacked him from behind. The stranger's gaze stayed on her. "Do you know whose car this is?" "No, and unless your name is Emergency Room, I do not care." Lenora swayed beside her. Kalista caught her immediately, all the fire in her face softening for one moment. "Stay with me. Keep your eyes open." The stranger saw that. He saw more than most men did. His attention moved from Kalista's fury to the careful way she held Lenora upright, the way her body had placed itself between the older woman and the door without thinking. His voice changed when he spoke again. "Marco," he said to the driver. "Private clinic, now." The SUV began moving. Kalista let out a breath she had not meant to hold. "Thank you. I did not do it for you." "That's fine. I didn't thank you for your personality." The man looked at her for a long second. Then he smiled. It was small, dark, almost dangerous in itself. "Your husband must be exhausted." "My husband has broken fingers and poor judgment." The smile deepened by a fraction. "Recent injury?" "Very." "Yours. Wedding gift." The man leaned back as the SUV rolled toward the exit. "That explains the blood. Some of it." The garage lights slid over his face, revealing the kind of calm that did not come from peace. It came from practice. Kalista had been around powerful men her whole life. Men who owned buildings, men who bought companies, men who gave speeches about values while cutting payroll in private. This man was different. He did not fill the car by trying to impress anyone. He filled it because the space around him seemed to understand it should behave. Lenora opened her eyes weakly. When she saw him clearly, her breath caught. Dante Moretti. Kalista went still. Even she knew that name. Dante Moretti was not old money. He was older than reputation in a different way. His name lived under polite conversations like a blade under a tablecloth. Construction deals whispered about him. Union bosses feared him. Politicians denied knowing him too quickly. Men with private security still looked over their shoulders when Moretti business crossed their path. Some called him a criminal. Some called him a necessary evil. Everyone agreed on one thing. If Dante Moretti came for what he was owed, no lawyer in Manhattan could save you. Kalista slowly looked back at him. Dante watched her realize it. "Ah," he said, "now you care whose car this is." Kalista swallowed, then lifted her chin. "Only because if I had known, I would have chosen a better entrance." The driver made that coughing sound again. Dante's eyes warmed with something like amusement. "You climbed into my car barefoot, in a robe, with blood on your hands, and gave orders. To be fair, it has been a stressful night, and yet you remain rude. I prefer focused." He looked at her cheek. The red mark had begun to darken. "Who hit you?" Kalista felt the question move through the car like a match struck in a dark room. "No one you need to punish." Dante's gaze sharpened. She regretted the sentence immediately because it sounded too much like an invitation to a man who probably kept revenge on a calendar. She looked away first, out at the city lights blurring past the window. "My husband," she said, "and before you get theatrical, I handled it." "I heard." Lenora made a tiny sound that might have been pain or surprise. Kalista adjusted the napkin at her lip. Dante looked at Lenora now, and all amusement disappeared. Sterling Kensington. Lenora flinched at the name. Kalista noticed. Dante noticed that she noticed. "How do you know Sterling?" Kalista asked. Dante's eyes returned to her. "He owes money in rooms where manners do not matter." "That is unfortunately the most comforting thing I have heard all evening." "Comforting?" "Yes. I was worried he was only evil at home. I prefer my villains with paperwork." Dante was silent for one beat. Then he laughed once, very softly, like the sound had escaped without permission. The clinic was hidden behind a quiet brick building on the Upper East Side, the kind with no sign large enough to invite questions. Dante's men moved first. Doors opened. A doctor appeared before Kalista had even helped Lenora out of the SUV. No one asked for insurance. No one asked why a wedding guest was bleeding. No one asked why Dante Moretti arrived with a bride who looked ready to bite through steel. Inside, the lights were warm and low. Lenora was taken into an exam room, with Kalista walking beside her, until the doctor gently said she needed space to work. Kalista hesitated, then looked at Lenora. "I'll be right outside." Lenora caught her hand. Her fingers were cold. "He will come." Kalista squeezed back. "Let him." The older woman's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. He always comes." Before Kalista could answer, Dante spoke from the doorway. "Not tonight." Lenora looked at him as if she wanted to believe him and was afraid belief itself might be punished. Dante did not soften his face, but his voice lowered. "No Kensington enters this clinic unless I allow it." Kalista watched him then. The most feared man in New York stood in a private clinic doorway, promising safety to a woman he did not know, and he said it like a simple fact, not a favor. That was the first moment her anger made room for curiosity. The doctor closed the door. Kalista stood in the hallway in her robe, bare feet cold against polished floor, cheek burning, hair falling wild around her shoulders. The adrenaline that had carried her out of the penthouse began to thin. In its place came trembling. She hated it. She folded her arms quickly so no one would see. Dante saw anyway. "There is a room where you can sit," he said. "I am not fragile." "I did not say fragile. I said sit." "You always turn concern into commands. Do you always turn help into an argument?" "Usually only when kidnapped by strangers." His eyebrows lifted. "You entered my car, under emotional pressure, and ordered my driver to flee the scene. Efficiently." He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head once, almost to himself. "You are a very strange woman, Kalista Hawthorne." She stilled. "I did not give you my name." "No," Dante said, "but you married a Kensington tonight. Half the city saw your photograph before dessert." "Wonderful. So my humiliation has press coverage. Your husband screaming in a garage with broken fingers may distract from it." That surprised a laugh out of her. A real one. Tired, sharp, and gone too fast. Dante's expression shifted again, barely, as if he had liked the sound and disliked that he liked it. Kalista sat, because her legs decided pride had become optional. Dante remained standing across from her. One of his men brought a pair of soft clinic slippers and a dark coat. Kalista accepted the slippers. She eyed the coat. "Is this a Mafia coat?" "It is wool." "That does not answer the question." "It is clean." Suspiciously clean. Dante placed it over the chair beside her, instead of forcing it into her hands. "Wear it or don't." She looked at him. That choice mattered more than it should have. After a moment, she pulled the coat around herself. It smelled faintly like smoke, cedar, and winter air. Her phone began ringing. Thatcher. She stared at the screen until it stopped. Then Sterling called. Then Aunt Coraline. Then an unknown number. Then Thatcher again. Dante glanced at the phone. Persistent. Rich cowards usually are. "Do you want them found?" Kalista looked up slowly. "I know where they are." "That is not what I asked." No. There it was. The danger under his calm. A doorway opening into a colder room. Kalista held his gaze and saw that he was not joking. If she said yes, something would happen. Something clean. Something quiet. Something the Kensingtons could not charm their way out of. For a second, the thought tempted her. Then Lenora's faint cry came from behind the exam room door. Kalista closed her eyes. "I want them exposed. I want every pretty wall around that family torn down in daylight. I want Lenora safe. I want my father protected. And I want Thatcher to learn that I was never the soft thing he thought he bought." Dante studied her. "Not revenge, then?" Kalista looked back at him. "Oh, it is absolutely revenge. I just want it well documented." This time Dante smiled fully. It transformed his face in a way that should have made him less frightening. It did not. It only made the danger look interested. "Then we may have a common problem," he said. Kalista's phone rang again. This time the name on the screen was Dad. Her throat tightened before she answered. "Hi." Garrison Hawthorne's voice came through loud and alarmed. "Kalista Rose Hawthorne, why is Thatcher Kensington calling me to say you attacked him and disappeared with his mother?" Kalista leaned back in the clinic chair and looked at the ceiling. "Because," she said, "Thatcher is committed to being inaccurate." There was a pause. Then her father's voice dropped. "Where are you?" "Safe." "That is not a location." "No, but it's the important part." "Kalista." She closed her eyes. For the first time all night, she felt young, not weak. Just tired enough to want her father to fix the world for 5 minutes, even though she knew he could not. "Sterling hit Lenora," she said softly. "Thatcher hit me when I tried to help her." Silence. The kind of silence that came before storms. Then Garrison said, very carefully, "Where is Thatcher now?" "Probably icing his fingers." "What did you do?" "What you paid for in those self-defense classes." Another pause. Then, despite everything, her father exhaled a hard little sound, that was almost pride and almost rage. "Send me your location." "I will. But Dad, there's more. I need Eric. Quietly. Financial quiet or legal quiet." Kalista looked at Dante, who was watching her with unreadable eyes. Both. Garrison did not ask why. That was one of the reasons Kalista loved him. When the house was burning, he did not demand a speech about smoke. "I'll wake him," he said. And Kalista, "Yes? You did right." Her eyes burned so suddenly she had to look away from Dante. "I know," she said, even though hearing it helped more than she wanted to admit. When she ended the call, the clinic seemed softer around the edges. Dante was still across from her, still dark, still dangerous. But now he looked less like a stranger and more like a question she had not expected the night to ask. "Eric?" he said. "My cousin, forensic financial analyst, annoying genius, terrible at birthdays, excellent with hidden accounts. Useful. Very. And mine, before you get ideas. I have people. I am sure you do. They probably wear black and frighten elevators. They are efficient. So are staplers. I still prefer people with personalities." Dante gave her a long look. "You speak this way to everyone?" "Only men who look like they are waiting for thunder to ask permission." The hallway went quiet. Something in Dante's face changed. Not enough for anyone else to name, but Kalista saw it. She had spent a lifetime being underestimated, which meant she had become very good at noticing tiny shifts in people who thought they were impossible to read. Before he could answer, the clinic door opened and the doctor stepped out. Kalista stood immediately. "Is she okay?" "She will be," the doctor said. "She has a split lip, bruising along the ribs, and an older injury near her shoulder that needs rest. Nothing appears broken tonight, but this has been going on for a long time." Tonight. The word sat heavily between them. Kalista nodded once. "Can I see her?" "She is asking for you." Kalista started toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Dante. He was already speaking to one of his men in a low voice. 2 guards outside this hallway. No Kensingtons. No police unless Mrs. Hawthorne asks. No calls into the room unless cleared. Kalista folded her arms. "Mrs. Hawthorne." His gaze slid to her wedding ring. "You do not look like Mrs. Kensington." Something inside her went strangely still. Then she removed the ring. It took effort. Her finger was swollen from the long day, and the diamond caught once against her knuckle before it came free. She looked at it in her palm, a huge cold stone, a promise that had turned into evidence. She handed it to Dante. He did not take it at first. "I am not your safe." "No," she said. "You're the man whose car I accidentally stole. That makes you involved." His mouth twitched. "That is not how law works." "It is how my night works." After a moment, Dante held out his hand. She dropped the ring into his palm. It looked smaller there. "If Thatcher asks for it," she said, "tell him he can have it back when he learns to sign divorce papers with his left hand." Dante looked at the ring, then at her. This time, when he laughed, even his men heard it. Kalista turned toward Lenora's room, but Dante's voice stopped her at the door. "Kalista." It was the first time he said her name without amusement. She looked back. "The Kensingtons will not let tonight end quietly. I know. They will threaten you. I assumed. They will lie. They already started. They may try to make you look unstable, greedy, violent, or ungrateful." Kalista touched her sore cheek, then smiled without softness. "Let them." Dante's eyes held hers. Most men, she thought, would have told her not to worry. Most men would have promised to handle it. Most men would have mistaken her exhaustion for surrender. Dante Moretti did none of those things. He simply nodded, as if he recognized the shape of the fight in her, and found it acceptable. "Then we begin in the morning," he said. Kalista opened the door to Lenora's room. "No, Mr. Moretti." She stepped inside, where Lenora was waiting beneath a white blanket, with frightened eyes and a bruised mouth. Kalista looked back once, her hair loose, his coat around her shoulders, her wedding ring gone from her hand. "We began when he slapped me." And behind her, in the quiet clinic hallway, Dante Moretti smiled, like the night had finally become interesting. By sunrise, every Kensington in Manhattan was looking for the bride who had vanished from her own wedding night, and Kalista Hawthorne was sitting in a private clinic wearing a Mafia boss's coat, while helping her new mother-in-law sip water through a straw. The city outside the window had turned pale and silver, but the night had not ended. It had only changed clothes. Somewhere above the quiet streets, Thatcher was probably holding his broken hand against his chest and telling anyone foolish enough to listen that his wife had gone mad. Sterling was probably calling lawyers who owed him favors. Aunt Caroline was probably deciding which version of the truth would sound most tasteful over breakfast, and Lenora Kensington, who had spent decades apologizing for the violence done to her, kept whispering thank you, as if kindness were something she had borrowed and needed to return. Kalista sat beside the clinic bed and pretended she was not exhausted enough to fall through the floor. Her cheek had swollen slightly, where Thatcher had slapped her, and the skin felt hot when she touched it. Her feet were tucked into the soft slippers Dante's men had found. His dark coat hung heavy around her shoulders, too large and too warm, making her look less like a runaway bride and more like a woman who had stolen winter from a dangerous man. Lenora noticed it, because women who lived inside violent houses noticed everything. Her eyes moved from the coat to Kalista's face and back again. "He gave you that?" Kalista glanced down, temporarily. "I think, with men like him, wool may come with a contract." Lenora's mouth trembled like she wanted to smile, but had forgotten how to let one stay. "Dante Moretti does not lend things." "Wonderful. Then I have committed another crime." Lenora reached carefully for Kalista's hand. The older woman's fingers were thin and cold, the nails perfectly shaped, the wedding ring still bright on her hand after all those years. Kalista tried not to stare at it. She wondered how many times that ring had flashed under soft party lights, while Sterling smiled for guests, while Lenora held a glass, while no one asked why her sleeve covered her wrist in July. "You should not have helped me," Lenora said. Kalista's eyes sharpened. "Do not start that with me." "I mean it. You were married only hours. You had a whole life ahead of you." "I still do." "Not with Thatcher." Kalista looked at the pale morning beyond the blinds. "That is the first blessing of the day." Lenora closed her eyes, and a tear slipped sideways into her hair. "Sterling will punish you for this. Sterling can take a number. My father is already in a mood, and Dante Moretti currently has my wedding ring in his pocket. The men in this story are going to have to organize themselves if they all want to be dramatic at once." That did it. Lenora laughed. Only once, softly, and it hurt her ribs, but it was real. Kalista smiled, because the sound felt like a small window opening in a locked house. Outside the room, low voices moved through the hallway. Dante had not left. Kalista knew that without checking. His presence sat in the building like a storm waiting politely. Every now and then, one of his men passed the narrow window in the door. They never looked inside, never intruded, but they were always there. Practical reasons, Dante would probably say, security, strategy, liability, anything except care. Kalista already understood that about him. He hid decent things behind colder words, so no one would mistake them for weakness. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Eric. Kalista answered before the second ring. "Please tell me you are awake and caffeinated." Eric Hawthorne sounded like he had been born annoyed by incompetence and had spent every year since gathering proof. "I am awake because Uncle Garrison called me at 4 in the morning and said, and I quote, 'Kalista married into a criminal beehive.' So yes, I am awake. I am also in their accounts." Kalista sat straighter. Already? Your father has access to 3 joint venture portals with Kensington Development, because apparently nobody in your family thought to ask me before signing contracts with decorative vampires. They wore excellent tuxedos. That is how vampires get you. Despite everything, Kalista felt some tight band around her chest loosen. Eric was strange, brilliant, allergic to small talk, and loyal in the terrifying way Hawthorns tended to be loyal. He could follow money like a bloodhound followed scent. What did you find? Enough to ruin brunch, Eric said. Fake invoices tied to construction material orders, duplicate billing through 2 shell vendors. One of them routes through a Delaware holding company. The other routes through a consulting firm registered to a woman who appears to have died 9 years ago, which is generally frowned upon in accounting. Kalista looked at Lenora, who was watching her with frightened hope. Sterling, Thatcher, and someone named Benedict Vale, though that might be an alias. Also, Thatcher's personal accounts are a disaster. He has loans against loans, private gambling debt, and a series of payments to lenders that do not have websites, licenses, or a healthy respect for tax law. Kalista leaned back slowly. So the lifestyle is fake. Not all of it. The arrogance appears genuine. A knock came at the door. Dante opened it only after Kalista nodded. He stepped inside with his sleeves rolled at the wrist and his phone in one hand. He looked as if he had not slept and had no intention of apologizing to his body about it. His gaze moved first to Lenora, then to Kalista, then to the phone at her ear. "Is that your analyst?" he asked. Eric went quiet. Kalista covered the speaker. "That depends. Is that your Mafia voice?" "It is my morning voice." Hard to tell the difference. Dante's mouth moved slightly. "Put him on speaker." Kalista did, because curiosity was stronger than pride. "Eric, you are now speaking to Dante Moretti. Be normal." Eric was silent for exactly 2 seconds. "I reject the assignment." Dante looked amused. "Mr. Hawthorne." "Mr. Moretti, I would say nice to meet you, but my cousin appears to have entered your vehicle covered in blood, so I assume the circumstances are legally textured." Kalista closed her eyes. "Eric." Dante's smile was small. "I need the vendor names." Eric did not hesitate. Halewick Stone, Northline Materials, and Caris Urban Consulting. Dante's expression changed. Not much, just enough for the air to tighten. Kalista noticed. "You know them." "Northline touched 2 of my protected projects last year," Dante said. "A shipment vanished. Sterling blamed union theft." "Was it union theft?" Eric asked. Dante's eyes cooled. "No." Eric made a thoughtful sound. "Then your problem and our problem are now holding hands." Kalista looked from the phone to Dante. "Sterling stole from my father and from you. He skimmed from Moretti-backed contracts," Dante said, then pointed suspicion toward men under my protection. "That seems unwise." "It is suicidal when done poorly, and when done well." Dante looked at her. Still suicidal, just slower. Lenora turned her face toward the wall. Her hand had begun to tremble. Kalista saw it and immediately lowered her voice. "Lenora, did you know about any of this?" Lenora shook her head, then stopped, as if honesty required more courage than silence. "I knew there was trouble. Sterling stopped letting me open mail years ago. He said I worried too much. Thatcher came to him 3 months ago asking for money. They argued in the study. Thatcher said the Hawthorne marriage would fix everything. Sterling said he had better make sure you were obedient first." The word sat in the room like something rotten. Dante went very still. Kalista did not. She smiled, and it was the least warm thing about her. "I hope they enjoyed that theory while it lasted." Eric cleared his throat through the phone. "I am sending a secure folder to you and Uncle Garrison. I need whatever Mr. Moretti has on Northline and related project payments." Dante looked at one of his men through the glass. "Marco will send it." "Excellent," I love cooperation among people who frighten banks. Kalista almost laughed, but Lenora's hand tightened around hers. There is more, Lenora whispered. Kalista leaned closer. Tell me. Lenora swallowed carefully. Sterling keeps paper records, not at the penthouse. He does not trust clouds, because he says clouds are where fools keep evidence. There is a locked cabinet in the library of the Kensington townhouse. Green leather ledger books. He writes names in them. Payments, favors, who owes what, who was invited, who was not. I once saw Thatcher's name beside yours, months before you were engaged. Kalista's blood cooled. Months. Lenora nodded. Before he met you at the museum gala. That memory rose in Kalista's mind with sudden bitterness. Thatcher spilling champagne near her dress, apologizing with just enough charm, praising her laugh, asking about her father's work, as if he were fascinated by boring industrial contracts. She had thought it was chance. She had thought she was being seen. She had been selected. For a moment, the hurt was quiet, not loud enough for rage yet, just a clean little crack through the center of something she had wanted to believe. Dante saw that too. He missed nothing, which was becoming both useful and irritating. Kalista, he said. She lifted her chin before her eyes could betray her. I am fine. No, you are angry. That is a form of fine in my family. Eric spoke gently now, which was rare enough to be alarming. Kalista, I can follow the digital trail, but if those ledgers exist, they matter, especially if Sterling has kept records of bribes or private lenders. Dante nodded once. We need them. Kalista looked at Lenora. Can you tell us how to find the cabinet? Lenora's face tightened. He changed the lock last year. Keys? Sterling wears one. Thatcher may have another. Dante slipped Kalista's wedding ring from his pocket and held it between two fingers, the diamond catching the clinic light. Then we visit the groom. Kalista stared at the ring. Please tell me your plan is not to trade jewelry for keys like some cursed fairy tale. My plan is to remind your husband that broken fingers can become a family discount. No. Dante's gaze shifted to her. Kalista stood, his coat falling around her like a dark curtain. No, Thatcher is mine. Your hand shook when your phone rang. That was adrenaline. That was fear. Fine, it was fear. I am allowed to be afraid and still lead. The room went very quiet. Dante looked at her for a long second. Then he did something she had not expected. He stepped back, not away in dismissal, back in respect. Then lead, he said. Something in Kalista's chest softened so suddenly it annoyed her. She turned to Eric on the phone. Send everything to Dad. Tell him not to call Sterling yet. Tell him to gather legal, but quietly. We go to the penthouse first. I want my clothes, my laptop, and every scrap of dignity they expected me to leave behind. That last item may not be at the penthouse, Eric said. You appear to have carried it out yourself. Kalista's throat tightened. Thank you. Do not get emotional. It disturbs me. I love you too. She ended the call and looked at Dante. Can your men get me something that is not a robe? Dante's gaze moved over the borrowed coat, the slippers, the wild hair, the swollen cheek. Not with pity, not with hunger, with calculation and something quieter underneath. What do you need? Kalista smiled. Something black, something comfortable. Something that says recently betrayed, but still better dressed than everyone in the room. For the first time that morning, Dante looked genuinely entertained. I know a woman. Of course you do. She is 73 and dresses half the widows in Queens. Kalista paused. That was not the answer I expected. Most people expect the wrong things. An hour later, Kalista stood in a small clinic washroom, wearing a black wrap dress with long sleeves, a pair of low boots, and gold hoops large enough to qualify as emotional support. The dress fit beautifully, which made her suspicious of Dante's mysterious 73-year-old fashion source. But she decided not to question miracles before noon. She washed her face, fixed her hair with pins a nurse had found, and applied lipstick from an unopened tube someone had placed in a paper bag with the clothes. Deep red, her color. The mark on her cheek remained visible. She considered covering it, then she did not. When she stepped into the hallway, Dante was waiting near the exit. His eyes moved once over her, only once. But the silence after it had weight. Kalista lifted an eyebrow. No comment? I am deciding whether honesty is dangerous. Usually? He held out his coat. She looked at it, then at him. I have clothes now. It is cold. That sounded dangerously close to concern. Strategic fabric. She took the coat because it was cold, and because she liked the way he did not smirk when she accepted it. Lenora stayed at the clinic with guards outside her room, and a Hawthorne lawyer already on the way. Before leaving, Kalista bent over her bed. I am going to get my things. Lenora gripped her hand. Do not go alone. Kalista glanced toward the hallway, where Dante stood with 3 silent men. I appear to have collected a small weather system. Lenora's eyes moved to Dante. Fear flashed there first, then something like relief. Sterling is afraid of him. Good, Kalista said. Let him enjoy a new experience. The ride back to the penthouse was quiet. Morning traffic had thickened, and Manhattan looked normal in the cruel way cities did after personal disasters. People crossed streets holding coffee. Dogs pulled on leashes. A woman in running clothes shouted into earbuds. No one knew that Kalista's wedding night had cracked open a dynasty before dawn. No one knew she was sitting beside Dante Moretti with divorce forming in her mouth like a weapon. Dante broke the silence first. Do you want me inside the room? Kalista looked at him. Yes. His gaze turned toward her. But not in front, she said. Beside. Or behind. Close enough to remind them the weather changed. Far enough that they know I am speaking for myself. Dante nodded. Done. You agree very easily for a feared man. I agree when the plan is good. And when it is bad, I improve it. That is arrogant. Often accurate. She looked out the window to hide her smile. At the tower, the doorman nearly swallowed his own tongue when he saw her step out of Dante Moretti's SUV. By the time they reached the private elevator, the building seemed to know. Staff looked away too quickly. A security guard fumbled with his access card. Dante said nothing. He did not have to. His men stood behind him like punctuation at the end of a threat. The penthouse doors opened to a room that still smelled of lilies and broken glass. Someone had cleaned the blood from the floor, but not well enough. Kalista saw a faint smear near the edge of the white rug. Her stomach turned, then steadied. Some marks wanted to be witnessed. Thatcher stood near the windows with his hand in a temporary cast, his face pale and swollen with sleepless rage. Sterling sat in a chair beside the fireplace, fully dressed in a navy suit, as if violence had office hours. Aunt Coraline stood near the bar wearing pearls and an expression of tragic endurance. 2 lawyers hovered near the dining table. All of them began speaking at once. Then Dante stepped out of the elevator behind Kalista. The room died. It was almost beautiful, really, the sudden quiet, the way Sterling's face lost color, the way Thatcher's mouth stayed open but forgot its sentence, the way Aunt Coraline's hand tightened around her pearls as if even inherited jewelry could pray. Kalista looked around. Good morning. I see the vipers have gathered. Thatcher found his voice first. What the hell is he doing here? Kalista smiled. You always wanted me to make powerful connections. Sterling stood slowly. Mr. Moretti. This is a private family matter. Dante's eyes moved to him. That sentence has worked poorly for your family tonight. Aunt Coraline stepped forward. Kalista, dear, whatever you think happened, you are clearly overwhelmed. Weddings are emotional. Lenora has episodes. Sterling was trying to calm her, and you misunderstood. Kalista looked at her for a long moment. Coraline, you are dressed like a funeral mint and lying before breakfast. Pick a struggle. One of Dante's men made the mistake of breathing too sharply. Dante did not look at him, but the man went still. Thatcher pointed at Kalista with his good hand. She broke my fingers. You slapped me. You attacked me. After you slapped me, you humiliated me in front of my family. Your family watched your father beat your mother. Humiliation was already seated. Sterling's voice cut through the room. Enough. Kalista turned to him. No, that word is not yours anymore. Sterling stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Not the bride, not the business connection, not the fat woman he had probably assumed could be controlled through shame and gratitude. Her, Kalista Hawthorne, daughter of Garrison, granddaughter of women who did not faint politely, wife of nobody worth keeping. One lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Kensington, perhaps we should discuss this without outside parties. Kalista held up one finger. First, never call me that again unless you want the room to become educational. Second, Mr. Moretti is not an outside party. Sterling's jaw tightened. He has nothing to do with this family. Dante finally moved. Only a few steps, slow and calm, until he stood near Kalista's right shoulder, not blocking her, not taking over. Just there. I have Northline Materials, Dante said. Halewick Stone, Caris Urban Consulting. 3 city contracts, 4 missing shipments, 7 altered invoices, and 1 insulting attempt to make my people look careless. Sterling's face hardened. I don't know what you think you have. That is the difference between us, Dante said. I do not think. Kalista opened the folder Eric had sent to her phone and mirrored it to the penthouse screen with a calm that felt better than screaming. Spreadsheets appeared where wedding photos had been displayed the night before. Vendor names, payment routes, duplicate invoices, transfers, shell companies, Thatcher's private debt payments, dates beside dates, amounts beside amounts, the Kensington name, stripped of polish and laid bare in numbers. Aunt Coraline looked at the screen, as if math had personally betrayed her. Thatcher's voice cracked. This is illegal. You hacked us. No, Kalista said. You invited my father into business and then used shared portals to rob him. That is not hacking. That is you leaving the pantry open and being shocked when someone counted the silver. Sterling looked at the lawyers. They were no longer eager to speak. Kalista stepped closer to Thatcher. He flinched before he could stop himself. She saw it, and so did everyone else. Here is what happens now, she said. You will sign divorce papers cleanly. You will make no claim to Hawthorne assets. You will return every dollar your family stole from my father's company. You will stay away from Lenora. You will not call her, visit her, send messages through relatives, or breathe in her direction with intention. Thatcher tried to laugh. It came out thin. You think you can give orders because you brought a thug into my home. Dante's men shifted. Dante did not. His eyes stayed on Kalista, waiting. That restraint did something to the room. Even Sterling understood it. Dante Moretti was allowing Kalista to hold the knife. She smiled at Thatcher. No, darling. I think I can give orders because you married a woman for access to her father's money, hit her before sunrise, and left a paper trail ugly enough to make federal prosecutors cancel lunch. Thatcher's face twisted. I will press charges for my hand. Kalista looked at his cast. Please do. I would love to explain the sequence of events in court, with photographs of my face, and Lenora's medical report, and perhaps testimony from every person in this room who watched Sterling hit her and forgot how legs work. Aunt Coraline whispered, This is vulgar. Kalista turned her head. No, Coraline. Vulgar is serving champagne in a room where a woman is bleeding. Sterling took one step forward. Dante's voice stopped him. Careful. One word. Quiet. Almost bored. Sterling stopped. Kalista looked back at Thatcher. The papers will be ready today. I am not signing anything. Dante finally smiled. It was not kind. Then you will spend the afternoon learning how many lenders want to speak with a man whose father can no longer cover his debts. Thatcher went grey. Kalista blinked. You found them already. Dante glanced at her. Men in debt are loud if you know where to listen. That is both impressive and rude. Thank you. It was not entirely a compliment. I accepted the useful part. Thatcher looked between them, anger mixing with something more humiliating, fear. You think this is funny? Kalista stepped close enough that he could see the mark his hand had left on her cheek. No, I think it is hilarious. For 1 second, the polished room held its breath. Then Dante laughed softly from the corner, and the sound made Thatcher look smaller than the cast on his hand. The divorce papers arrived before noon because Garrison Hawthorne was a man who believed love meant speed, lawyers, and occasionally shouting at printers. He arrived with 2 attorneys, 1 security specialist, and a face so calm Kalista knew he had already imagined several crimes and chosen paperwork instead. When he saw her cheek, his eyes changed. Thatcher took 1 step back. Garrison walked to his daughter and touched her face with 2 fingers, gentle as a prayer. Does it hurt? Less than his hand. His mouth tightened with pride he did not want to show in front of enemies. Good. Then he looked at Dante. For a moment, the 2 men measured each other in silence. 1 old business power, 1 underworld power, 2 different storms. Moretti, Garrison said. Hawthorne, thank you for my daughter. Kalista immediately said, I am not a misplaced umbrella. Dante's gaze flicked to her. No one would mistake you for something that folds. Garrison looked between them once, and even in the middle of disaster, raised an eyebrow. Kalista pointed at him. Do not start. The signing happened at the dining table beneath a chandelier that had probably watched generations of Kensingtons lie beautifully. Thatcher sat with his broken hand in its cast, gripping a pen awkwardly in his left. The first signature came out crooked. Kalista leaned over. That says Thad. His jaw clenched. My hand is broken. Yes, I was there. Dante stood by the window, looking out at Manhattan. Try again, Thad. Garrison coughed once into his fist. One of the lawyers studied the ceiling with heroic focus. Thatcher signed again. Better this time. Not elegant, not powerful, not Kensington, just ink from a frightened man finally doing as he was told. When the last page was signed, Kalista removed the wedding band from her finger and placed it on top of the papers. The diamond ring was already there, returned from Dante's pocket with no ceremony. She looked at Thatcher. You can keep them. They match the marriage. Expensive, cold, and badly chosen. Aunt Coraline made a wounded sound. There is no need to be cruel. Kalista picked up her purse. That is true, which is why I am being precise. She walked to the bedroom and packed only what mattered, her laptop, her grandmother's earrings, the lipstick from the reception, her own clothes. She left the gown hanging over a chair. Let them keep it. Let it haunt their cream-colored room like a beautiful accusation. When she returned, Dante was waiting near the elevator, not impatient, not possessive, just waiting. Kalista looked back once at the Kensingtons. Sterling's face had collapsed into something old and hateful. Thatcher would not meet her eyes. Coraline looked as if the room had become too common for her. Lenora is gone from you, Kalista said. So am I. Sterling's mouth curled. You will regret making an enemy of this family. Kalista stepped into the elevator beside Dante. Sterling, by tomorrow morning, your family will be lucky if your enemies still take your calls. The doors slid shut. Only then did Kalista let her shoulders drop. For a moment, She closed her eyes. She had not cried, not in the penthouse, not at the table, not while signing away the shortest marriage in Hawthorne history. But now the elevator moved downward, smooth and quiet, and the day caught up to her all at once. Dante did not speak. That helped. After a few floors, she opened her eyes. You were very quiet. You told me beside or behind. I did. I listen. She looked at him. There was no smile on his face now, no dry amusement, only that unnerving stillness, the kind that made space for truth without touching it. Kalista swallowed. I thought he loved me. Dante's jaw shifted slightly. I know that sounds stupid after everything. It does not. She laughed once without humor. You are supposed to be terrifying, not kind. I did not say kind. I said accurate. Strategic kindness again? Something like that. The elevator opened into the garage. Dante's SUV waited exactly where it had been the night before, as if the whole terrible story had circled back to the wrong door that saved her. Kalista looked at it, then at him. I climbed into the wrong car. Dante opened the door for her. No. She paused. His eyes held hers. You climbed out of the wrong life. Kalista stared at him for one long second. Then, because feeling too much made her nervous, she said, That was dangerously poetic. You should have that checked. Dante's mouth curved. Get in, trouble. She did. This time, she did not ask him to drive. This time, she knew exactly whose car it was. And when the SUV pulled away from the tower, leaving the Kensington penthouse high above them like a bright little coffin in the sky, Kalista Hawthorne looked down at her bare left hand and felt something strange begin beneath the grief. Not peace yet. Not happiness. Not love, because that would have been absurd. But freedom had a pulse, and for the first time since she had put on the wedding dress, Kalista could feel it beating. Freedom had a pulse, and for the first few blocks, Kalista Hawthorne did not trust it. She sat in the back of Dante Moretti's SUV with her left hand resting open in her lap, staring at the pale line where her wedding band had been. It looked too small to be proof of anything. One faint circle on her finger, one swollen cheek, one black dress borrowed before breakfast, and somehow her whole life had split into before and after. Before, she had been Mrs. Kensington for a few violent hours. After, she was Kalista again, carrying her laptop, her grandmother's earrings, and enough rage to heat the city through winter. Outside the window, Manhattan kept doing what Manhattan did best. It moved on loudly. Taxis honked. Steam rose from street grates. A man in a grey scarf argued with a coffee cart vendor like pastry selection was a moral emergency. Nobody looked at the black SUV. Nobody knew that inside it, a ruined bride was slowly becoming the most dangerous woman in the room. Dante sat across from her, quiet in the way only very controlled men could be quiet. He was not scrolling through his phone. He was not giving orders. He was watching the city, but Kalista had the strong sense that he was also watching her reflection in the glass. She should have found that annoying. She did find it annoying. She also found it strangely steadying. There was no pity in him. That mattered. Pity would have made her scream. Dante seemed to understand that the worst thing he could offer her right now was softness without respect. After several minutes, he said, "You have not asked where we are going." Kalista kept looking out the window. I assumed either the clinic, my father's office, or a warehouse where men named Marco discuss loyalty near folding chairs. His mouth moved. The clinic first. Disappointingly normal. I can arrange folding chairs later. Please don't. My day is already dramatic. He leaned back. Your father is meeting us there. Your cousin is sending files. My people are collecting Northline's records before Sterling's men can destroy them. Kalista finally looked at him. And how are your people doing that? Carefully. That is not an answer. It is the answer that keeps you from becoming an accessory. I was married to Thatcher Kensington before sunrise. I think my standards for association have already suffered. Dante almost smiled. Noted. The clinic was calmer when they returned, though calm had become a suspicious thing. Kalista no longer believed quiet rooms were safe just because no one was yelling in them. Lenora was sitting up against pillows, wrapped in a soft grey robe one of the nurses had found. Her face looked smaller in daylight, without silk and diamonds and the forced smile she had worn at the reception. But her eyes were clearer. That was something. Garrison stood near the window speaking quietly to a lawyer, his big shoulders stiff under his coat. When he saw Kalista, he stopped mid-sentence and crossed the room so quickly Dante's men stepped aside without being told. Garrison pulled her into his arms. Kalista held herself together for exactly 2 seconds. Then she leaned into him and closed her eyes. Her father smelled like coffee, wool, and the peppermint candies he kept in his desk drawer because he claimed they helped him think. He did not say she was brave. He did not say everything would be fine. He just held her, like he had when she was 7 and had fallen off a pony because she refused to admit she was afraid of jumping. Back then, he had waited until she stopped shaking, then asked if she wanted to get back on or go home. He had never made the choice for her. That was one of the reasons she had always known what love was supposed to feel like. "I'm all right," she said into his coat. "No, you're not," she breathed out. "No, but I'm standing. That is a start." Dante remained by the door, speaking low to Marco, pretending not to watch father and daughter. Kalista noticed anyway. She was beginning to understand his kind of restraint. He could have stepped into every space, could have taken command the way powerful men love to do when a woman was shaken. Instead, he stayed near the edge of the room and let the people who loved her reach her first. Eric arrived 20 minutes later with 3 laptops, 2 coffees, and the expression of a man who had discovered both a crime and a formatting issue. He set everything on the small table by Lenora's bed and began opening files without saying hello. Kalista looked at him. "Good morning to you too. I have been awake too long for greetings. You love this." "I love clean evidence. This is dirty evidence, but there is a lot of it, so I am emotionally conflicted." He looked at Dante. "Your Marco sent excellent files. Terrifying file names, but excellent." Marco, from the hall, looked proud, and then quickly looked blank again. Eric turned one laptop toward the room. Sterling did not just skim. He built a whole little theater of theft. Fake vendors, inflated material orders, cancelled shipments that were billed anyway, consulting fees routed through companies connected to Thatcher's private lenders. The Hawthorne contracts were supposed to cover his cash gaps. The Moretti-linked projects were supposed to cover his underworld debt. He was moving the same money in circles and hoping everyone would blame everyone else before noticing him. Lenora stared at the screen. "Sterling always said the numbers were too complicated for me." Eric's face softened, which for him meant his voice lost one sharp edge. They were not too complicated. He just needed you to believe the door was locked. Kalista looked at Lenora, and the older woman's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she did not apologize for them. Dante stepped closer to the table. "What about the ledgers?" Eric tapped another file. "We need them. Digital evidence is strong, but if Sterling kept written records of bribes and private lending arrangements, that becomes the spine. It connects motive, intent, and names." Garrison's lawyer nodded. "With the clinic report and the witnesses from the penthouse, we can also move for protection for Lenora." Lenora flinched. "Sterling will fight." Kalista took her hand. "Let him. He has had decades of practice terrifying people in private. Now he can try it with paperwork and bad lighting." Lenora's mouth trembled again. "You make everything sound less impossible." "No," Kalista said. "I make it sound properly stupid. Sometimes monsters shrink when you describe them accurately." Dante watched her when she said that. It was not the look men had given her at the wedding, the look that measured her body and decided what story to write over it. Dante's gaze had weight, but not judgment. He looked at her like she was a fire he respected enough not to touch without permission. By noon, the plan had formed around the room like weather. Garrison's lawyers would file emergency motions and freeze Hawthorne payments to Kensington Development. Eric would send the strongest financial trail to federal investigators he trusted through legal channels. Dante's people would cut off Sterling's access to the private lenders who had been keeping him afloat and collect proof from the Moretti-protected projects. Lenora would remain at the clinic until a safe apartment was ready. No one liked the last part except Dante, who simply said he had an empty apartment in Queens and 3 guards who could look bored outside a building, better than anyone in the city. Kalista folded her arms. Why do you have an empty apartment in Queens? Many reasons. That answer has a trench coat. It is clean, quiet, and not connected to the Kensingtons. Lenora looked worried. I don't want to bring trouble to anyone. Dante's voice lowered. Mrs. Kensington, trouble has already spent years living in your house. Let it be inconvenienced for once. Lenora looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Kalista looked away before Dante could see her smile. He saw it anyway. That evening, the ledgers came out of the Kensington Townhouse Library. Not because anyone broke a window or kicked down a door, though Dante looked like he knew men who considered both hobbies. They came out because Lenora remembered that Sterling kept a duplicate cabinet key inside the base of an ugly bronze horse statue he had inherited from an uncle he hated. The detail arrived suddenly while she was drinking tea. She sat upright and whispered, "The horse." Everyone turned. Then she began laughing so hard she had to hold her ribs. I forgot the horse. I always hated that horse. Garrison's lawyer arranged entry with the police present, under the claim of retrieving Lenora's personal documents. Sterling had already fled to his club. Thatcher was hiding at a doctor's office and telling people his bride had assaulted him during a mental episode. Aunt Coraline was giving careful phone calls to friends, painting the family as victims of vulgar Hawthorne aggression and dangerous outside influence. But paper did not care about manners. Neither did ledgers. They found 5 green leather books in the cabinet, exactly where Lenora said they would be, lined up like obedient little ghosts. By the time Eric opened the first one, even he went silent. Sterling had written everything down. Payments to inspectors, gifts to councilmen, transfers disguised as restoration donations, names of men who lent Thatcher money, notes beside Kalista's name from before the engagement, Hawthorne daughter, high-value access, sensitive about appearance but publicly confident, approach through arts charity, father protective, cousin financial risk, secure marriage before audit season. Kalista read that page twice. Sensitive about appearance. The words did not hurt the way Thatcher's slap had. They hurt in a different place, a quieter place. She thought of every compliment he had given her that now tasted poisoned. The way he had said he loved her confidence, the way he had praised her bold clothes, the way he had acted as if accepting her body made him noble. She stood in Eric's office with the ledger open beneath her hands and understood that Thatcher had not failed to see her. He had studied her. He had looked for doors in her heart and tried to find one marked insecurity. Dante was the one who reached across the table and gently closed the ledger. Kalista looked up. He said nothing at first. That was wise. Then he said, he was wrong. She laughed, but it came out thin. About which part? There are so many exciting options. About your softness being a weakness. Her throat tightened. Dante's hand rested on the closed ledger, close to hers but not touching. Soft things survive differently. That is not the same as fragile. For once, Kalista had no sharp answer ready. She looked down at their hands, separated by less than an inch and a world of caution. Then she pulled hers back, not because she wanted distance, but because she was afraid of wanting less of it. Over the next week, The Kensingtons began to fall. It did not happen all at once. That would have been too kind. It happened slowly, publicly, and with the kind of elegant humiliation their family had always feared more than poverty. First, Hawthorne Industries filed suit and froze all active payments. Then, investigators arrived at Kensington Development with warrants. Then 2 banks suspended accounts after Eric's evidence reached the right desks. Then Northline Materials stopped answering Sterling's calls because Dante's people had made it clear that every door Sterling used in the old quiet world was now closed. Men who had once smiled at him in private rooms began forgetting his number. Women who had once feared Aunt Coraline's invitations began declining them. The newspapers did not call it abuse at first. They called it financial misconduct, a collapse, a scandal involving construction fraud. Rich families were always granted polite language before the truth got its shoes on. But then Lenora signed her statement. She did it in the safe apartment in Queens, sitting at a small kitchen table with jasmine in a cracked blue pot near the window. The apartment had been empty when she arrived, but Kalista refused to let it feel temporary. She brought blankets, dishes, curtains, books, and a kettle. Garrison sent furniture. Eric sent a home security system so elaborate even Dante raised an eyebrow. Dante sent guards and claimed they were necessary because Sterling might try something reckless. Kalista accused him of being secretly kind. He told her he did not tolerate slander in safe houses. Lenora's statement took 4 hours. She spoke of Sterling's temper, the first slap, the first apology, the first time he told her no one would believe her because everyone loved a charming man with a wounded wife. She spoke of Aunt Coraline helping hide bruises with scarves and foundation. She spoke of Thatcher learning early that women stayed quiet if men made the consequences expensive enough. She cried twice. She stopped once. Kalista sat beside her the whole time, not touching unless Lenora reached first. When it was done, Lenora looked smaller and lighter at the same time. "I thought saying it would kill me," she whispered. Kalista squeezed her hand. "And?" Lenora looked toward the window, where the jasmine leaves caught the afternoon sun. It did not. The story changed after that. The papers stopped calling it a business scandal. Former staff came forward, a driver, a housekeeper, a retired assistant who had kept photographs in case Lenora ever asked for help. A Kensington cousin admitted everyone knew Sterling could be cruel, though he used the word difficult because cowards loved soft furniture for hard truths. The city began doing what it always did when a polished family cracked. It pretended it had seen the cracks all along. Sterling was arrested on a wet Thursday morning outside his club. The photo was everywhere by lunch. Silver hair flattened by rain, expensive coat. One officer guiding his head down into the car. His face carried the shocked anger of a man who had believed consequences were for other people. Thatcher vanished for 2 days, then resurfaced at a hotel under his mother's maiden name, which might have been clever if Eric had not already flagged every card connected to him. He was charged later, less grandly than Sterling, but just as satisfyingly. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted extortion, domestic assault after Kalista filed her own statement and released the clinic photo of her cheek through her lawyer with the simple line that she had nothing to hide. Aunt Coraline was not arrested. Kalista almost thought that was worse for her. Coraline lost something she valued more than freedom. She lost invitation. Clubs quietly removed her from committees. Charities discovered moral standards overnight. Women who had once feared her opinions now looked through her in restaurants. Her power had always depended on rooms agreeing to pretend she mattered. Once the pretending stopped, there was very little woman left. Through all of it, Dante kept appearing. Not every day. Never on a schedule. That would have been too honest. But he was there when Lenora moved in. He was there when Eric needed Moretti project records explained. He was there when Garrison wanted to know whether Sterling had other underworld debts that might become legal problems later. He was there one night when Kalista arrived at the apartment with groceries and found him in the hallway holding a paper bag from a bakery, looking deeply annoyed to be associated with pastries. She stopped in front of him. "Are those muffins?" "They are documents." "The documents smell like cinnamon. Then the bakery has poor security." Lenora opened the apartment door behind them and smiled for the first time without flinching. Dante brought breakfast. "It is 6 in the evening," he said. Kalista took the bag from him. "Then clearly you are not a criminal mastermind. You are a confused brunch aunt." His eyes narrowed. "I have ended men for less." "No, you haven't." He leaned closer, voice low. "You are very certain for a woman in a hallway with no witnesses." She looked up at him. "There are 2 guards by the elevator, a retired teacher across the hall with the door cracked open, and Lenora holding what appears to be a ceramic goose. I like my odds." Dante looked toward the apartment. Lenora did, in fact, have a ceramic goose in one hand. She blushed. It was near the door. For one long second, the 3 of them stared at one another. Then Kalista laughed. Lenora laughed too. Even Dante lowered his head, and though no sound came out, his shoulders moved once. That was how the romance grew, not through grand speeches, though Dante was occasionally guilty of saying something darkly poetic and then pretending he had not. Not through rescue, because Kalista refused to be anyone's rescued woman. It grew through arguments over practical things. Over whether guards outside Lenora's building were discreet if they all wore the same black coat. Over whether Dante's driver should stop opening Kalista's door when she was perfectly capable of opening it herself. Over whether sending a private chef to a woman who had asked for a simple casserole was thoughtful or alarming. Over whether Dante's idea of casual dinner should involve a restaurant with a private entrance and menus without prices. He learned her favorite coffee order, then denied knowing it. She learned he hated olives, then ordered extra just to watch his face. He called her trouble. She called him expensive weather. He sent Lenora a new lock for the apartment and labeled it a structural upgrade. Kalista sent him a thank you card that said, "Congratulations on experiencing emotions." He kept it in his desk and threatened Marco when Marco noticed. Dante never once treated her body like something to excuse. That was new enough to scare her. He did not compliment her like he was forgiving her size. He did not say she was beautiful despite anything. He looked at her when she entered a room as if the room had improved its argument. He liked the bold dresses, the red lipstick, the gold jewelry, the way she occupied space like she had paid rent to the universe and expected a receipt. Once, during a meeting with Garrison and Eric, a contractor made the mistake of speaking over her twice. The third time, Dante did not threaten him. He simply turned to Kalista and said, "Finish what you were saying." The room followed his attention back to her. She finished. The contractor never interrupted again. Later, in the hallway, she said, "I could have handled him." "I know." "Then why did you do that?" "I did not handle him. I returned the room." She stared at him for so long he almost looked uncomfortable. Then she said, "That was also dangerously poetic." "I will make an appointment." "Good. It is becoming chronic." But not everything was charming. Healing never moved in a straight line, and freedom had sharp corners. Lenora had nightmares. Kalista had sudden waves of humiliation that arrived when she least expected them, usually in quiet moments, usually when she remembered the wedding guests calling her lucky. Sometimes she woke angry enough to pace her apartment at 3 in the morning. Sometimes she wondered how she had missed so much. Sometimes she wondered whether some small part of her had accepted Thatcher's polished affection because she was tired of being treated like confidence made her difficult. One night, Dante found her outside Lenora's building, sitting on the front steps in a wool coat while rain misted over Queens. His SUV waited at the curb. He did not ask what was wrong. He sat beside her, which made the narrow step look almost ridiculous under the weight of him. Kalista stared at the wet sidewalk. "I hate that he picked me." Dante's gaze remained forward. Thatcher? Sterling, Thatcher, the whole rotten nest. I hate that they studied me and decided I would be useful. I hate that I smiled at him. I hate that I thought it was love when it was a business plan with teeth. Dante was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Predators do not choose weakness. They choose value they think they can control." Kalista turned toward him. His face was serious, shadowed under the streetlight. "They chose you because you were valuable. They failed because you were not controllable." Her eyes burned, and she hated that too. "Do you practice these things in mirrors?" "No. You just walk around saying emotionally devastating things at women in the rain. Only one woman." The rain made the silence softer. Kalista looked at him then, really looked. The feared man, the dangerous man, the man people whispered about and owed money to and crossed streets to avoid. He was sitting on a wet step in Queens because she was sad, and he had chosen not to make her sadness smaller than it was. He was patient with her anger, careful with her fear, amused by her sharpness, never once surprised by her courage. That was the first night she let herself touch his hand. Only his hand, only for a moment. Her fingers rested over his knuckles. His hand turned beneath hers, slow enough that she could move away. She did not. Neither of them spoke. For once, the city handled the noise. 6 months later, Lenora had Jasmine on the balcony, 3 locks on the door, and a breakfast sandwich habit that had become almost holy. She made them every Saturday morning in the tiny Queen's kitchen, standing in soft house slippers with her hair loose around her shoulders, humming to herself while eggs sizzled and bread toasted. The first time Kalista heard her hum, she had to step into the hallway and pretend to check a message because the sound undid her. It was not a grand victory. No judge had announced it, no newspaper had printed it, but a woman who once walked on silent feet through a penthouse full of fear was now humming off-key over a frying pan in an apartment where every cup belonged to her. That felt bigger than headlines. Sterling was awaiting trial. Thatcher had accepted a deal that kept him out of society and very much inside consequences. Aunt Coraline had moved to Connecticut, where she reportedly used the phrase "family tragedy at lunch" and found fewer listeners every week. Hawthorne Industries recovered most of the stolen money, and Garrison donated part of the restitution to a fund for women leaving abusive households. Eric named the spreadsheet for the case Kensington Trash Fire Final, then had to rename it when lawyers objected. Dante's organization recovered what it was owed and made sure the men who had helped Sterling hide behind false contracts understood that the old arrangement was dead. He never told Kalista the details. She never asked for all of them. They had learned where respect required a door, and where trust meant not opening every locked room just because you had the key. On that Saturday morning, Dante drove Kalista to Lenora's apartment himself. He claimed Marco was busy. Kalista knew Marco was not busy because she had seen him drinking coffee outside Dante's building 10 minutes earlier, but she decided to allow the lie because Dante was particularly handsome when he was pretending not to want ordinary things. He stopped at the curb and came around to open her door. Kalista looked up at him from the seat. "Still not a chauffeur? I am not a chauffeur. And yet here you are, opening doors. I open doors for difficult women who accuse me of emotional growth." That sounds like a very specific business model. Low volume, high risk. She stepped out, smoothing the emerald green dress she had chosen because Lenora loved bright colors now, and because Dante always went quiet for half a second when she wore green. He did it again. She caught him. "Subtle," she said. "I said nothing. Your face filed a report. My face is private. Not when it looks at me like that." Dante leaned slightly closer. "How does it look at you?" Kalista's answer caught in her throat, which was deeply inconvenient, because she enjoyed having the last word. His eyes were warm today, still dark, still dangerous, but warm in a way that belonged only to her. That was another thing she had learned. Dante could be feared by half the city and still look at one woman as if setting down every weapon at her feet. Before she could answer, Lenora opened the balcony door above them and called down, "If you two are done arguing romantically on the sidewalk, breakfast is getting cold." Kalista looked up. "We are not arguing romantically." Dante said, "We are." She turned on him. "Traitor." He offered his arm. "Trouble." She took it. Upstairs, Lenora's apartment smelled like toast, coffee, butter, and jasmine. Sunlight spilled across the small table. The blue pot on the balcony had grown fuller, green vines curling around the railing, like they had finally found something safe to hold. Lenora looked different now, not younger exactly. Freer. Her face still carried lines from the life she had survived, but they no longer looked like cracks. They looked like proof. She hugged Kalista first, then surprised Dante by hugging him too. He stood perfectly still for 1 second, as if no one had trained him for peaceful attacks from grateful women. Then he carefully patted her back. Kalista watched with delight. "Are you malfunctioning?" Dante gave her a warning look over Lenora's shoulder. "No." Lenora stepped back, smiling. "He brought oranges." Kalista looked at the bag on the counter. Of course he did. "They are for vitamins," Dante said. "Strategic citrus?" "Yes." Breakfast was loud in the small, lovely way family meals became loud. Lenora asked about Kalista's new consulting work with Hawthorne Industries, where she had begun reviewing partnership culture before contracts were signed, because apparently she had developed a talent for smelling expensive rot under polished manners. Eric called halfway through to complain that nobody appreciated his new fraud model. Garrison sent a photo of himself holding a fishing rod and looking too pleased with retirement for a man who still visited the office 4 days a week. Dante answered 3 messages, frowned at one of them, and put the phone away when Kalista stole a piece of bacon from his plate. "You have your own," he said. "Yours looked emotionally neglected." It was not. "It is now safe." Lenora laughed into her coffee. After breakfast, Kalista stepped onto the balcony. The city looked different from here than it had from the Kensington penthouse. Lower, louder, more alive. There was laundry on a line across the alley, children yelling near the corner, music from an open window, someone frying onions downstairs. Nothing here pretended to be spotless. Kalista loved it for that. Dante came out behind her, bringing her coat, though she had not asked. She glanced at it. "You know, one day I may experience weather without your supervision." Unlikely. Bossy. Accurate. She slipped into the coat anyway. His hands did not linger when he helped her. They never did unless she asked. That carefulness still reached parts of her she had not known were waiting. For a while, they stood beside the jasmine in comfortable silence. Then Dante said, "There is a dinner next week." Kalista looked at him. That sounded like a trap wearing shoes. "It is a charity dinner, public. Many people who have been curious about you will attend. Curious about me, or curious whether the fat runaway bride is now dating the Mafia boss who helped ruin her in-laws." His jaw tightened at the word fat, not because he disliked it, but because he disliked the way other people used it against her. Kalista had learned the difference. "Both," he said. She appreciated that he did not lie. "And you want me there?" "I do." "As what?" The question hung between them, not because she did not know, because she needed him to say it carefully. Dante turned toward her. "As yourself, not as proof. Not as a warning, not as a woman under my protection. Beside me, if you choose it." There it was again, the door, open but not pushed. Kalista looked down at the street. 6 months ago, she had walked into a wedding believing she was entering a polished life. Instead, she had found blood on marble, cruelty in silk, and a wrong black SUV waiting in a garage like fate had a dark sense of humor. She had lost a husband she never truly had. She had gained enemies, scars, and a story people would whisper about for years. But she had also found Lenora. She had found a new use for her own rage. She had found a man who could frighten a room silent and still wait for her answer like it mattered more than his pride. She turned back to Dante. You understand, people will talk. People already talk. They will say I moved from one dangerous man to another. His face stayed calm, but something in his eyes darkened. And have you? Kalista studied him. She thought about Thatcher's hand on her wrist. Sterling saying family business. Aunt Coraline calling violence emotional. Then she thought about Dante stepping back at the clinic when she said she would lead. Dante closing a ledger before it cut her deeper. Dante sitting in the rain, letting silence do the work. Dante opening doors but never locking them. No, she said. I moved from being handled to being heard. Dante's expression changed so softly that anyone else might have missed it. Kalista reached for his hand, more certain this time. But if you ever start thinking protection means making my choices for me, I will become extremely educational. His thumb brushed once over her knuckles. I would expect nothing less. Good. And if anyone at that dinner insults you, I will handle it. I know. She narrowed her eyes. That sounded sincere. It was. How unsettling. Dante leaned closer. Kalista. She forgot, briefly, what she had planned to say next. He touched her face with the back of his fingers, not the cheek Thatcher had struck, but the other one, gentle and slow. May I kiss you? The question moved through her like sunlight after a long winter, not because no one had kissed her before, because he asked as if wanting did not erase her right to answer. Kalista smiled. You may. No. Dante kissed her on Lenora's small balcony beside the jasmine, with breakfast cooling inside and queens waking around them. It was not rushed. It was not claimed. It was warm, careful, and deep enough that Kalista forgot every clever thing she had ever known how to say. When he pulled back, his forehead rested near hers for one quiet second. Then Lenora called from inside, I am happy for you, but if you make me pretend not to see this, I will burn the second batch of sandwiches. Kalista burst out laughing against Dante's mouth. Dante closed his eyes as if praying for patience. Your family is loud. Kalista touched his lapel. You should have thought of that before letting me into your car. You let yourself into my car. Details. He looked at her then, really looked, and smiled in the way only she got to see. Best mistake of my life. Kalista's chest went soft and bright all at once. She could have made a joke. She almost did. But some moments deserved to be allowed to stand without armor. So she said, mine too. Later, when they left the apartment, Dante opened the car door for her again, and she let him, mostly because he looked so satisfied by the ritual, and partly because she liked catching the little ways dangerous men became tender when they thought no one was taking notes. As the SUV pulled away, Lenora waved from the balcony, surrounded by jasmine and morning light. Kalista waved back, until the building turned the corner and disappeared. Dante drove this time, which still looked strange enough to amuse her. The most feared Mafia boss in New York, hands steady on the wheel, pretending he had not spent his morning carrying oranges and being teased by women he could not intimidate. Kalista leaned back in the passenger seat. You know, you really are a dramatic man. I am driving quietly. Exactly, dramatically quiet. You are trouble. She smiled at the city through the windshield. Yes. Dante glanced at her. Proud of it? Kalista looked down at her bare left hand, then out at the road ahead. She thought of the wedding gown left behind in the penthouse, the broken fingers, the green ledgers, Sterling in handcuffs, Thatcher signing with his left hand while Dante called him Thad, Lenora humming in her kitchen, her father saying she had done right. Eric renaming evidence files badly. Dante asking before he kissed her. The whole impossible path from chaos to this quiet car. "I am," she said, because the wedding night that ruined her life had not ruined her at all. It had burned down the wrong future before she could live inside it. It had shown her the truth. Beneath diamonds and champagne, it had carried her, barefoot and furious, into the wrong black SUV and placed her face to face with a man the city feared, only for her to discover that fear was not the same as power, and power was not worth having unless it knew how to protect without owning. Kalista Hawthorne had entered the Kensington family as an underestimated bride they thought they could use. She left it as the woman who exposed them, freed Lenora, defended her father, and made the most dangerous man in New York laugh when he least expected it. She had learned that love could begin in chaos, but it could not survive without choice. She had learned that loyalty was louder than reputation. She had learned that taking up space was not a flaw, not a challenge, not an apology waiting to happen. It was a warning. And beside her, Dante Moretti drove through the bright Manhattan morning with one hand on the wheel and the other resting open between them, waiting until she chose to take it. So she did. The Mafia boss came through Camilla Rossi's clinic door, with blood on his hands, rain on his shoulders, and the kind of silence that made every gun in the room feel louder. He did not ask for help. Men like him rarely asked for anything. They arrived, and the world moved. But Camilla had been awake for 19 hours. Her last good scalpel had vanished from tray 3. The roof above exam room 2 was leaking into a plastic trash can, and a half-dead boy was bleeding across her floor. So when Dante Costa, the most feared man in Chicago, stepped into her clinic like he owned the building, Camilla pointed one bloody glove at him and said, "Move your expensive shadow out of my light." For 1 second, nobody breathed. Not the 2 armed men crowding the hallway, not the nurse frozen beside the medicine cabinet. Not the young man on the table, whose face had gone gray beneath the buzzing fluorescent lights. Not even Dante Costa, who stood there in a black coat worth more than Camilla's rent, staring at her as if she had just slapped him with a wet chart. The storm outside shook the windows. Thunder rolled over the south side like something heavy being dragged across the sky. Behind the clinic, smoke drifted from the alley where Dante's armored car had rammed into Camilla's supply van hard enough to fold the front of it like cheap foil. The van had been old, ugly, and deeply unreliable, but it had belonged to her. More importantly, it had been full of sutures, saline, antibiotics, gauze, and the emergency oxygen tank she had begged a hospital supervisor to sell her after hours for cash. Now half of that was scattered across wet pavement, and the other half was under the front tire of a bulletproof car. Camilla should have locked the door. That would have been the smart thing. That would have been the safe thing. A different doctor might have seen the guns, the blood, the slick black car, the man with cold eyes and a reputation that made cops suddenly remember appointments across town, and decided that death had arrived with better funding than the clinic. A different doctor might have stepped back and said no. Camilla Rossi was not a different doctor. She was a trauma surgeon with aching feet, a temper sharpened by poverty, and an old rule carved somewhere deep in her bones. If someone was dying in front of her, she worked, even if that someone belonged to Dante Costa. Even if Dante Costa himself stood close enough to make the entire clinic feel smaller. "Pressure," she snapped. One of Dante's men looked at her blankly. Camilla turned her head slowly. "Do I need to translate that into rich criminal? Put your hand here and press down before your friend decorates my floor with the rest of his blood." The man looked at Dante first. That annoyed her more than it should have. "He is not the one with the medical license," Camilla said, "unless I missed the part where murder school teaches vascular repair." Dante's gaze moved from her face to the boy on the table. Then he gave one tiny nod. His man lunged forward and pressed both hands over the wound. The boy gasped. "Sorry, kid," Camila murmured, her voice softer now, because patience got the part of her that was still gentle. I know it hurts. Stay with me. What's your name?" "Nico," he whispered. His voice was thin, too thin. Camila glanced at his pupils, his skin, the trembling in his mouth. Young, maybe 19, maybe less. Old enough to bleed like a man, young enough to still look surprised by pain. "Hi, Nico. I'm Dr. Rossi. You picked a terrible night for a dramatic entrance." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then his eyes rolled. "Nope," Camila tapped his cheek. "None of that. You do not faint in my clinic without permission." The nurse beside her, Maribel, finally found her breath. "BP is dropping." "I can see that." Camila reached for the trauma tray, then stopped. "Where is the clamp?" Maribel opened the drawer. Empty. Camila stared at it. The clinic had many enemies: insurance companies, broken pipes, city inspectors who showed up only when she had not slept, patients who paid in crumpled bills and apologies, but nothing betrayed her quite like missing tools. "Of course," she said calmly, too calmly. "Of course my vascular clamp is gone tonight." Why would God waste a storm and a mafia shooting on a fully stocked clinic? Dante looked at one of his men. Leo. The man at the door moved before Dante finished saying his name. He was huge, broad as a refrigerator, and about as expressive. His shaved head shone under the fluorescent light. There was blood on his sleeve, but he did not seem to notice it. "What do you need?" Leo asked. Camila looked him up and down. A vascular clamp, 2 units of O negative, a functional generator, a new van, and possibly a priest with low expectations. Leo blinked. "She means the clamp first," Maribel said quickly. Camila lifted her chin toward the storage room. "Second shelf, blue bin, back left. If you touch anything that says sterile with those hands, I will remove your fingers and label them educational material." Leo looked at Dante again. Dante said nothing. Leo went. Camila cut Nico's shirt open. The bullet had entered low on the left side, ugly and deep. Too much blood, too much swelling, bad angle. She had worked worse wounds in better rooms and better wounds in worse rooms, but this one sat right in the awful middle, where skill mattered and luck mattered, and the universe sometimes got mean for entertainment. She breathed once, slow, quiet. Then the clinic became an operating room because she decided it would. "Maribel, start another line. Miguel, get the portable suction. Dante Costa, if you are going to stand there looking like a funeral statue, hold this light." Dante's eyebrows moved. Barely, but they moved. Maribel made a small choking sound that might have been fear or laughter. Dante walked forward. He moved like a man who had taught rooms to respect him. Not fast, not slow, controlled, every step measured, every breath under command. His dark hair was wet from the rain, pushed back from a face too calm for the chaos around him. There was a cut near his temple. Blood trailed down the side of his neck and disappeared beneath his collar. He ignored it. Camila handed him the exam light. "Point it here, not at my face. Not at his shoes. Here. Do not get creative." Dante held it exactly where she told him. That should not have surprised her. It did. Most powerful men had terrible hands when they were not holding weapons, pens, or women's futures. They fumbled when usefulness required obedience. They became offended when instructions came from someone they did not already fear. Dante did not fumble. He did not argue. He stood beside the table in silence and kept the light steady while Camila opened Nico's body and searched for the bleeding that was trying to steal him. The storm battered the clinic walls. Somewhere outside, sirens passed and kept going. Of course they kept going. Police cars had a special gift for arriving after poor neighborhoods had already swallowed the dangerous part. "Bullets still in," Camila said. Dante's eyes sharpened. Don't look proud. It is not a souvenir. She reached deeper. Maribel, suction. Miguel, if that monitor dies again, hit the side, not the top. It likes side violence. Miguel, who had been a janitor 6 months ago and was now somehow the best emergency assistant she had after midnight, slapped the monitor. It flickered back to life. See? Camila said. Medicine. Dante watched her. She felt it even when she did not look at him. Men had watched Camila all her life, but not usually like that. Some watched her body first, with quick little judgments they thought were subtle. Too big, too loud, too much. Some watched her mouth, waiting for it to become polite. Some watched her hands, surprised when thick fingers moved with precision, when the fat surgeon had the cleanest stitch line in the room, when the woman they had underestimated could hold a life between 2 forceps and refuse to drop it. Dante Costa watched differently, not gently, not warmly, carefully, as if he had expected a desperate neighborhood doctor and found a storm with a medical degree. The clamp landed in Camila's palm. Good boy, Leo, she said. Leo froze. Maribel looked down. Dante's mouth did something strange, not a smile, almost the memory of one. Camila clamped the bleed and did not think about it. For the next 23 minutes, the clinic forgot to be poor. The peeling paint, the outdated cabinets, the cracked tile, the bucket under the leak, the flickering sign in the front window that only lit up the letters CLIN and left IC to fend for itself, all of it faded under the rhythm of work. Blood, pressure, suture, suction, breath, pulse. Again, again, again. Nico tried to leave once. Not physically, his body was too weak for that, but she saw it happen in his face, that quiet slipping away, that distant softness that came over dying people when the room began to lose them. Camila leaned close. No, she said. His eyelids trembled. You do not get to make me do all this paperwork for a corpse. Stay. Dante looked at her then. Really looked. Maybe because of the word, stay. Maybe because he was used to giving orders that men obeyed out of fear, and Camila gave one to death itself, like death was an underpaid intern with bad timing. Nico's pulse jumped beneath her fingers. Weak, but there. Camila stitched faster. When it was done, the room did not celebrate. Emergency rooms rarely celebrated out loud. They simply became quieter. The kind of quiet that arrived after a fight nobody had been sure they could win. Camila tied the last suture and leaned back. Sweat dampened her hairline. Her back ached. Her gloves were ruined. Her favorite scrub top looked like it had been used to clean up a crime scene, which technically was not inaccurate. Nico is alive, she said. For now, he needs monitoring, antibiotics, fluids, and a better life plan. His eyes did not leave the boy. He will have them. Great. Start with not getting him shot. Leo looked offended on Nico's behalf. He was ambushed. Camila peeled off her gloves. Was he ambushed near my van? Leo said nothing. Then I dislike the ambush. Dante finally turned to her. What do you need? That was the wrong question to ask a tired woman in a failing clinic. Camila pointed toward the back door. A new supply van, a new clinic door, replacement sutures, gauze, antibiotics, blood packs, oxygen tank, 2 crash cart drawers, 1 trauma tray, and the good scissors someone stepped on while entering with all the grace of a collapsing piano. One of Dante's men looked down at his shoe. Camila narrowed her eyes. I knew it. Dante reached inside his coat. Half the room tensed. Camila did not. She was too tired to be afraid on schedule. He removed a money clip. Of course he did. The thing looked stupidly elegant. Black metal. Thick bills. No normal person carried money like that unless they wanted the world to know they had never once checked a bank app with anxiety in their throat. He placed several hundreds on the metal counter. Camila stared at them. Then she picked them up, counted them, and held out her hand. Dante's gaze flicked to her palm. More? That was for the surgery. His eyes cooled slightly. And the rest? The van you crushed. The door your refrigerator friend broke, the supplies your people bled on, the staff overtime, the biohazard cleanup, the emotional damages caused by Mafia nonsense, and a personal irritation fee because you entered my clinic during my last coffee break. The room went so still again that even the rain seemed to lean closer. Dante studied her for a long moment. Camilla studied him back. He was handsome, annoyingly, not in a soft way. Nothing about him was soft. His face had hard angles, dark lashes, a mouth shaped for warnings, and eyes so deep brown they almost looked black under the clinic lights. He carried violence quietly, the way other men carried cologne. There was no need for him to raise his voice. The threat lived beneath it. People probably felt lucky when he ignored them. Camilla did not feel lucky. She felt hungry, underpaid, and deeply protective of her floor. Then Dante Costa did the last thing she expected. He laughed. Not loudly, not warmly. Just one low breath, almost unwilling, as if the sound had escaped a locked room inside him. Leo looked disturbed. Maribel looked fascinated. Camilla held her hand steady. Dante added more money. She counted it again. Still short, she said. Leo muttered something in Italian. Camilla pointed at him. I do not know what that means, but I heard the tone. Dante added the rest without looking away from her. Camilla folded the bills and tucked them into the locked cash box under the counter. Pleasure doing business with your disaster. This clinic is vulnerable, Dante said. Camilla slammed the cash box shut. This clinic is open. Those are different things. Raphael Voss's men may have followed us. That name changed the room, though Camilla did not know why at first. Leo's expression hardened. Miguel crossed himself. Maribel looked toward the windows. Even Nico, unconscious and pale, seemed to rest in the shadow of it. Camilla wiped her hands on a towel. And Raphael Voss is... Dante's voice was calm. A problem. Your problem? Yes. Then why is his problem bleeding on my table? Dante stepped closer, but only one step. Smart man. Because tonight he tried to kill one of mine, and nearly killed my van. His gaze held hers. If Voss learns Nico survived here, he may come back. There it was. Not a threat from Dante. A warning. It should have scared her more. Maybe it did, but Camilla had learned a long time ago that fear was just information wearing ugly shoes. It told you what mattered. It told you where the danger stood. It did not get to make the decision by itself. She looked around her clinic, at Maribel, who had 3 children and always took the late shift because the day shift at Mercy paid better but treated her worse. At Miguel, who sent half his paycheck to his mother in Pilsen and pretended not to sleep in the back office when rent got tight. At the cracked walls and tired chairs and the little plastic basket near the front desk where patients left what they could. $5. 12 quarters. A note that said, I will pay Friday. Promise. A jar of homemade salsa from Mrs. Alvarez after Camilla drained her grandson's abscess and refused money. This place was not impressive. It was not clean enough, rich enough, quiet enough, safe enough, or blessed by the kind of donors who liked their generosity printed on plaques. But it was hers, and people came here when every other door had closed. Dante Costa did not know that yet, but he would. You are not moving your war into my clinic, she said. I am trying to keep it away from your clinic. Your armored car is smoking in my alley. Yes. So far, your technique needs work. Another tiny pause. Another almost smile. Camilla hated that she noticed. Dante looked toward Nico. He cannot go to a hospital. Voss has people watching the emergency rooms. I did not ask why you came here. No, Dante said. You asked why my problem was on your table. Same neighborhood. Not the same answer. Camilla did not like that he was right. She walked to the sink and scrubbed her hands, though the blood was already mostly gone. She needed the movement, needed the hot water biting her skin, needed one normal thing in a night that had cracked open and let the city's underworld drip onto her exam table. Behind her, Dante spoke again. I can protect this place. Camila turned off the water. There were many sentences she hated. You should smile more. Are you sure you need that much? Calm down. You're overreacting. But I can protect you sat near the top, wearing an expensive suit and smelling like ownership. She turned around slowly. No, she said. Dante's face changed by almost nothing. No. No, you do not get to walk into my clinic, break half my alley, bleed on my tile, and then announce protection like I won a prize at the Danger Carnival. His men stared at her, as if she had chosen death with impressive confidence. Dante only listened. That annoyed her too. It was harder to fight a man who did not interrupt. I am not one of your people, Camila continued. I do not work for you. I do not owe you loyalty because you paid a bill you caused. I will treat a dying patient because I am a doctor, not because a crime lord made spooky eye contact near my supply closet. Leo's eyebrows rose. Dante's voice remained level. If Voss targets you, refusing my help will not make you safer. Maybe not, but accepting it without terms will make me stupid. The storm boomed overhead. Something in Dante's eyes shifted. Interest, maybe. Respect, possibly. Trouble, definitely. What terms? He asked. Camila blinked. She had expected argument. Threat. That quiet male patience powerful men used when waiting for a woman to exhaust herself. Instead, Dante Costa asked for terms, as if she had offered him a contract across a boardroom table. Camila dried her hands. First, no guns in patient areas unless someone is actively trying to murder us. Leo looked at Dante. Dante nodded once. Second, your people follow clinic rules. They wash their hands. They wait their turn. They do not scare patients, flirt with nurses, threaten the receptionist, bleed on furniture without apologizing, or call me sweetheart unless they want anesthesia without the fun part. Miguel coughed. Maribel suddenly became very busy adjusting Nico's forvag. Third, Camila said, stepping closer, I decide who I treat and how. You do not order me to save one man and abandon another because of whatever dramatic chessboard you people are playing. Dante's jaw tightened. There. A nerve. Good. Camila liked knowing where they were. Fourth, I do not leave this clinic because you snap your fingers. I do not get hidden, stored, escorted, collected, or relocated without my consent. I am fat, not portable furniture. Dante's gaze flicked over her, not in the way men usually looked when that word entered the room. No disgust, no surprise, no lazy little scan. He simply saw her, all of her, and returned to her eyes. Understood, he said. Camila did not know what to do with that, so she frowned harder. And fifth, if Raphael Voss or anyone else breaks my clinic, you pay triple. Dante looked at the cracked ceiling, the ancient cabinets, the bucket catching rainwater. Triple may be cheaper than repairs. Do not insult my building while standing in it. It was an observation. So is an autopsy. Still rude at dinner. Leo made a sound. This time, Camila was almost certain it was a laugh. Dante turned his head slightly. Leo became silent. Camila pointed between them. No, do not scare him out of laughing. I enjoyed that. It made him look briefly human. Leo looked personally betrayed. Dante's mouth moved again. This time it almost became real. Then the front window shattered. Glass burst inward with a sound like ice exploding. Maribel screamed. Miguel ducked. Leo moved faster than seemed possible for a man that size, pulling his gun as Dante stepped in front of Camila. Not beside her, in front. The movement was instant, clean, thoughtless. His body became a wall between her and the broken window. Camila stared at his back, wide shoulders, wet coat. Blood drying at his collar, one hand lifted slightly, not touching her, not pushing her, simply blocking the line of danger. Outside, across the street, a black sedan idled under the broken streetlight. No bullets came. Not yet. Instead, something small rolled across the clinic floor, and stopped near Camilla's shoe. A phone, old, cheap. Its screen lit up. Dante did not move. "Do not touch it." Camilla looked at him. "I was not planning to cuddle it." The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Everyone stared. Dante bent and picked it up before anyone else could. His face turned colder the moment he looked at the screen. Then he answered and placed it on speaker. A man's voice filled the broken clinic. Smooth, amused, almost friendly. "Dante," the voice said, "you made a new friend." Leo's grip tightened on his gun. Dante said nothing. The voice continued. "I was hoping Nico would reach a hospital. Hospitals are so easy to watch. But this is better. A little clinic, a brave doctor, very touching." Camilla felt the soft fear then. Not sharp, not loud. Soft. The kind that slid under the ribs and waited. Dante looked toward the shattered window, but the sedan was already gone. "Raphael," he said. So this was him. Raphael Voss. Not a shadow, not a rumor. A voice on a cheap phone in her bleeding clinic. "I wanted to thank Dr. Rossi," Raphael said. "Skilled hands are rare. Loyal men are replaceable, of course. But skilled hands can change a war." Camilla's stomach tightened. Dante's eyes met hers. There was warning in them. And something else. Regret. As if he already understood that the moment she had saved Nico, she had stepped onto a road that would not politely let her turn back. Raphael laughed softly. "Tell the doctor she should have closed the door." The line went dead. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Rain blew through the broken window and dotted the floor with cold water. The clinic smelled like blood, glass dust, and the storm. Nico slept under sedation, alive because Camilla had refused to let him die. Dante stood between her and the night, still holding the silent phone. Camilla looked past him at the mess, the broken glass, the blood, the ruined supplies, the black alley beyond the back door where her van was still crushed beneath someone else's war. Then she looked at Dante Costa. He seemed ready for fear, maybe anger, maybe the kind of silence normal people gave men like him when the world reminded them what standing near him could cost. Camilla took the phone from his hand. Dante let her. She dropped it into the metal kidney dish beside the sink. Then she picked up her clipboard, wrote 3 words on the top sheet, tore it off, and handed it to him. Dante looked down. His eyebrow lifted. "Another bill?" Camilla folded her arms. "Window. Triple." And for the first time that night, while thunder rolled over Chicago and Raphael Voss's threat still hung in the wet air, Dante Costa smiled like he had just found the one person in the city impossible enough to survive him. Dante Costa smiled at Camilla Rossi like she had just handed him a weapon he did not know he needed, and Camilla hated how much that smile changed his face. It did not make him harmless. Nothing about him could ever be harmless, but for one quick second, the cold, feared man standing in her broken clinic looked almost alive in a different way, as if amusement had caught him off guard and left a small crack in the armor. Then, the wind pushed rain through the shattered front window. Maribel cursed softly from behind the desk. Nico's monitor gave one tired beep, and Camilla remembered that she was still standing in a disaster with a Mafia boss, a half-dead patient, and a bill she fully intended to collect. "Do not smile at me like this is charming," she said, taking the paper back from his hand and tapping the word triple with one finger. "This is financial grief with witnesses." Dante's eyes stayed on her. "I will pay for the window." "You will pay for the window, the wall, the deep cleaning, the emotional suffering of my receptionist, and the therapy I now need, because my evening has included a shooting, a car crash, and a man named Raphael calling my clinic like a haunted boyfriend." Leo, who had been checking the street through the broken glass, glanced over his shoulder. "Haunted boyfriend? Did I stutter?" Camilla snapped. Leo looked at Dante, as if asking whether this was allowed. Dante only said, "Get the street secured." Leo gave one nod and moved outside with 2 men. his gun low at his side, his body cutting through the rain like the storm had offended him personally. Camilla watched them go and felt her anger trying to cover the fear again. Anger was useful. Fear was noisy. Fear made people small if they let it take the wheel. She had built this clinic out of anger, out of every hospital administrator who called uninsured patients a burden, every surgeon who looked at poor neighborhoods like they were sad news reports instead of places full of people with names, every rich donor who wanted a photograph with suffering but not a payment plan that actually saved lives. She had not built it to become a stop on some Mafia war map. Still, when she turned toward Nico, her voice softened. "You better appreciate this, kid. I am giving you 5-star care in a 1-star building." Nico did not wake, but his breathing stayed steady. That small rhythm kept her standing. Dante stepped closer to the table, his expression losing the smile. "Can he be moved?" "Eventually." "How long?" "Long enough for you to stop asking that like the answer can be bullied into changing." She checked the IV line and adjusted the blanket over Nico's chest. He lost too much blood. The bullet tore more than it should have. If you move him tonight, you turn my work into a sad little memory. Dante absorbed that in silence. He looked at Nico for a long moment, and Camilla noticed something she wished she had not. His anger was not clean. It had weight beneath it. Worry, maybe? Responsibility. The kind of grief powerful men hid under sharp suits and colder orders because nobody near them knew what to do if they looked human. By sunrise, Dante's men had turned the clinic into something between a hospital ward and a quiet fortress. A plywood panel covered the broken window. 2 guards stood outside, trying very hard not to look like guards, and failing in the exact way large men with earpieces always failed. Leo returned with coffee, breakfast sandwiches, a temporary generator, a replacement oxygen tank, and 3 sealed boxes of medical supplies that Camilla was absolutely certain had been acquired faster than legal shipping allowed. She stared at the boxes stacked near the nurse's station. Did these fall off a truck? Leo's face did not move. No, that pause was suspicious. The truck was parked. Maribel laughed before she could stop herself, then turned it into a cough. Camilla pointed at Leo. "You are learning. I dislike that." Leo placed a paper cup beside her. "Coffee. Black, 2 sugars." Camilla went still. "Who told you that?" Leo nodded toward Dante, who stood near the back door on a phone, speaking quietly enough that no one else could hear. Camilla looked at the coffee like it had personally invaded her privacy. "I drank 1 cup in front of him." "He notices things," Leo said. "That sounds exhausting for everyone, mostly for his enemies." Camilla picked up the cup, took a sip, and immediately became more irritated because it was right. Perfect, actually. Hot, strong, sweet enough to keep her from becoming legally dangerous. "Tell your boss I do not accept emotional manipulation in beverage form." Leo nodded as if this were a serious instruction. "I will tell him after you finish it." Dante ended the call and walked toward her. He had changed coats at some point, but the cut near his temple remained. He had refused when Maribel offered to clean it, refused again when Miguel pointed at the blood with a mop handle, and ignored Camilla the first time she snapped that infection did not respect crime families. Now, in the thin gray light of morning, he looked too pale beneath his calm. Camilla noticed, because noticing was her curse. "Sit," she said. Dante looked at her. "I'm fine." That is a sentence men say 5 minutes before they fall dramatically into furniture. I have work to do. So do I. And right now my work is preventing you from passing out and denting my floor. Sit. Leo's head turned very slowly, as if he wanted to see whether any man in history had survived giving Dante Costa that tone. Dante held Camilla's gaze. Then, to the visible shock of every criminal in the room, he sat on the nearest exam stool. It squeaked under the weight of the moment. Camilla pulled on clean gloves and stepped between his knees without asking permission, because she was tired and he was bleeding, and there were only so many forms of tension a woman could process before coffee. Dante did not move. She cleaned the cut with practiced hands. He watched her face while she worked. which was annoying because it made her aware of her own mouth, the slope of her cheeks, the stubborn curl escaping her bun. "Stop staring," she said. "I am watching the doctor who charged me for emotional damages, and I am watching a grown man with a head wound pretend he is made of steel. I've had worse. Congratulations. Trauma is not a loyalty program." His mouth almost moved again. She pressed the antiseptic harder than necessary. "Do not smile. I am still mad about my van." The van became the first real argument of the morning. Dante wanted to replace it by noon. Camilla wanted him to repair hers because it had the specific shelving system she liked, and the left back door only stuck if opened by idiots. Dante said crushed engines were not emotional heirlooms. Camilla said men with armored cars did not get opinions about practical vehicles. Dante said her old van had been unsafe. Camilla said so was he, but she was still allowing him indoors under supervision. By the time the sun fully rose, Maribel had stopped pretending not to enjoy herself, Miguel had made popcorn in the break room microwave, and Leo had learned where Camilla kept the extra gloves. Dante finally said, "You need a better vehicle." Camilla folded her arms. "I need many things. A better city, a second surgeon, a roof that does not cry indoors, a supply chain that does not depend on favors from nurses who steal expired gauze for me, a patient population that does not have to choose between antibiotics and rent. But yes, sure, let us focus emotionally on the van." Dante looked around the clinic then, not with disgust, but with calculation. She could almost see his mind opening drawers and making lists. She hated it immediately. "No." His eyes came back to hers. "I didn't say anything. Your face did. My face. Your rich man problem-solving face. I have seen it on hospital board members right before they rename something after themselves." Dante stood slowly. "What if I fund what you need?" "Then I ask why." "Because I need a doctor I can trust." "Try again." His expression grew quieter. "Because this place should not have to survive on stolen minutes and broken equipment." That landed harder than she wanted it to. Not because it was romantic. It was not. It was too close to true. Camilla looked away first, furious with herself for doing it. "Money always comes with hands attached." "Then cut them off in the terms," Dante said. "You seem comfortable with knives." She should not have liked that answer. She absolutely should not have. But by that afternoon, while Nico slept through fever and the storm rolled away into a wet, shining Chicago morning, Camilla found herself at the back desk with a legal pad, writing terms in blue ink, while Dante sat across from her like a man negotiating a treaty with a small country that had excellent posture and terrible plumbing. She wrote that her clinic stayed hers. He could pay for security, supplies, repairs, and emergency transport, but he could not decide who received care. His men would follow her rules inside the building. No intimidation of staff, no weapons visible in patient spaces unless there was active danger. No using her clinic to question, threaten, punish, or hide anyone against their will. No one entered an exam room without permission. No one touched a nurse. No one touched a patient. No one touched the coffee maker, except Miguel, because Miguel had opinions, and Camilla respected them. Dante read every line without complaint. Only once did he pause. "You wrote that I cannot move you without consent." "Correct. Even if there is an immediate threat. You can inform me, advise me, annoy me, and present evidence. You cannot pick me up like a dramatic suitcase." Leo, who had been standing near the door, looked as if he briefly imagined this, and then wisely destroyed the thought. Dante's gaze stayed on the paper. "And if you refuse when danger is coming, then you may strongly regret knowing me." He looked up. "I already suspect that will happen." "Excellent. We are bonding." The first week of their arrangement should have been impossible. Instead, it became strangely organized. Dante's wounded men began arriving through the alley after midnight, not in loud waves, but one by one, quiet and scared beneath their tattoos, gold chains, and hard faces. Some had knife wounds, some had bullet grazes, Some had broken fingers they claimed came from Dawes, despite Camilla having met Dawes and finding the story insulting. She treated them all the same. She made them sign false names only if they insisted, but she still wrote their allergies down correctly. She made them wash their hands before entering patient areas. She made one man take off his muddy boots and sit in socks for 40 minutes after he tracked alley water across her floor. She told another that if he called Maribel baby one more time, she would staple his mouth shut for educational reasons. Word spread quickly through Dante's crew that Dr. Rossi feared God, infection, and poor charting, in that order, and possibly God was in third place on difficult days. Men who had once made entire restaurants go silent began lining up in her waiting room with paper cups of coffee, holding gauze to their ribs and whispering because the sign said, "Quiet hours after 10." Leo became the strangest part. At first, he stood near Camilla, like a wall with a pulse, saying nothing unless Dante asked him a direct question. Then one night, during a bad case involving a torn shoulder and a man who kept insisting he did not need stitches while actively dripping on the floor, Camilla shoved a tray into Leo's hands and said, "Hold this and stop breathing like a thundercloud." Leo held it. The next time, he passed her gauze before she asked. 3 nights later, he knew the difference between forceps and clamps. By the end of the second week, he was silently restocking the trauma drawer with the solemn focus of a monk arranging sacred candles. Camilla caught him alphabetizing antibiotics and stared until he looked over. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. I just did not expect the executioner energy to come with pharmacy management. Dante said you like things reachable. Dante talks about me?" Leo froze, which was answer enough. Camilla smiled slowly. "Interesting. I heard nothing," Leo said. "You heard the question. I am choosing peace." Dante came almost every night, though he rarely admitted it was for her. He came to check on Nico. He came to speak with Leo. He came because Voss's men had moved near Ashland. He came because a delivery was arriving. He came because he was already in the area, which Camilla found impressive considering his area seemed to include every street her clinic touched. Sometimes he stood in the doorway while she worked, quiet and watchful. Sometimes he took calls in the alley, his voice low, his shadow long beneath the security light. Sometimes he brought food. The first time, it was from a private restaurant Camilla had only seen in magazines at dental offices. Dante placed the containers on her desk after a brutal night when 3 injured men arrived within 20 minutes and she had worked until her hands cramped. Camilla opened one box and stared at the tiny artistic portions inside. "Is this dinner or a threat?" Dante glanced at the food. "It is from Belladonna. Of course it is. Even the rice looks judged. You don't like it. I am sure it is delicious for someone with a chandelier-based personality." She opened another container and found spicy pasta, roasted peppers, crisp chicken, warm bread, and a small dish of chili oil on the side. Her complaint died halfway up her throat. Dante noticed. Of course he noticed. "The first restaurant was mine," he said. "The second was what you wanted." Camilla looked up. "And how would you know what I wanted? You put hot sauce on soup. That could mean anything. You also called Miguel's mild salsa a tomato apology." Miguel across the room lifted his hands. It was mild. Camilla looked back at Dante, suddenly unsure what to do with the fact that he listened to throwaway comments and returned with chili oil. The problem was that Dante was easier to dislike when he acted like the monster everyone whispered about. He did not always do that near her. He was still dangerous, still commanding, still the kind of man who could receive a phone call and make 3 cars move across the city with one sentence. But Camilla started seeing the pauses between those sentences. She saw the way his eyes changed when Nico woke in confusion and asked if Dante was mad. Dante sat beside him and said no, very quietly, like the word cost something. She saw him send money to the widow of a man who had died in Raphael's first ambush, then closed the file before anyone could thank him. She saw him stand outside the clinic at dawn, with rain dripping from his coat, because an old woman inside was afraid of armed men, and he decided the easiest way not to frighten her was to become wet in the alley. Camilla wanted to be unimpressed. She truly did. But the most annoying thing about people was that they became harder to judge once they kept doing human things in front of you. Nico recovered slowly and worshipped her immediately. The first time he managed to sit up without cursing, he looked at Camilla with round, grateful eyes and whispered, "Thanks, Doc Boss." Camilla stopped checking his chart. "Absolutely not." Nico smiled weakly. "Doc Boss, I saved your life. Do not repay me with nicknames. You boss everyone, because everyone is incompetent near wounds. And you're the doctor. Excellent. So we agree on Dr. Rossi." Nico looked at Dante, who stood near the door. "Doc Boss is better." Dante's face remained unreadable, but Camilla saw the tiniest betrayal in his eyes. He liked it. "I hope your next soup is cold," she told him. "That seems unfair," Dante said. "You encouraged a patient uprising." "I said nothing." Your silence had dimples. Leo turned away so fast, Camilla almost heard his neck crack. The danger did not stay outside the warmth for long. It never did. Raphael Voss was not the kind of enemy who attacked once and waited politely for consequences. His men began circling Dante's territory in clever ways, not just shooting, not just burning cars or breaking windows. They spread rumors, they bribed minor crews, they sent photos of wounded men left outside closed hospitals. They whispered that Dante could protect wealth and weapons, but not bodies. That was when Camilla understood the shape of the war. It came to her while she was changing Nico's dressing, and he mentioned, half asleep from medication, that Raphael's men had yelled something before the shots. "What did they say?" she asked. Nico blinked at her. "Doc Boss, I was bleeding. Try." His face tightened with memory. "They said to tell Dante dead men don't follow kings." Camilla's hands stilled. Later, she pulled Dante into the supply room, because it was the only place where everyone did not immediately pretend not to listen. The shelves were newly stocked now, because Dante's money had moved quietly through her broken clinic and made things appear like practical magic. "Raphael is not just trying to kill your people," she said. "He is trying to make them believe getting hurt means getting abandoned." Dante's expression hardened. "I know. No. You know the violence part. I am talking about the medical part. He wants fear to spread through wounds. Every man who thinks he cannot get care becomes a loose brick in your wall." Dante said nothing. Camilla stepped closer, tapping his chest with one finger, before thinking better of it. He looked down at the touch, then back at her. The air changed, softly, dangerously. She removed her hand. "Your loyalty problem is bleeding, Costa. I can help with that." His voice lowered. "You already are. Not enough. Not if they are scared to come here. Not if I have one clinic, one generator, one Leo who now thinks he is a nurse because he can pronounce cefazolin." From outside the room, Leo said, "I can pronounce it." Camilla closed her eyes. "Why are walls useless around criminals?" Dante's gaze did not leave her face. "What are you suggesting?" "A system, safe routes, rotating entry points, supply kits, field pressure training. Your men need to know that if they go down, they have a way back." She took a breath. "Not because you are terrifying, because somebody will come for them." For a moment, Dante looked at her in a way that made the small supply room feel even smaller. "You speak about my men like they are yours." Camilla swallowed. "They are my patients. There is a difference. Not when they are bleeding." That was the night Dante asked her to dinner properly, not with containers on her desk, not with coffee disguised as strategy, not with a driver waiting like an assumption. He stood in the alley after midnight, while the city steamed from fresh rain, his coat open at the throat, his expression too controlled to be casual. "Eat with me," he said. Camilla, who was locking the back door, looked at him. That sounded like a command wearing date shoes. It was an invitation. Try again. Dante's jaw shifted. He looked almost offended by the rules of softness. Then he said, slower, "Would you have dinner with me, Camilla?" Her name in his mouth was a problem. Not because he said it sweetly. He did not. Dante Costa did not sound sweet. But he said it carefully, like he knew it belonged to her and not to him. She should have said no. She had charts to finish, sleep to chase, a clinic to protect, and absolutely no business sitting across from a mafia boss who remembered her coffee and looked at her like she was a mystery he respected too much to solve quickly. Instead, she heard herself say, "Only if the restaurant has normal lighting." Define normal. If I need a candle and a spiritual guide to find my fork, I am leaving. He nodded. Understood. The restaurant was closed when they arrived, which Camilla immediately called suspicious. Dante said he owned it, which did not help. But the lights were warm instead of dramatic, the table was near the kitchen instead of in the center like a performance, and the chef brought out food that smelled like garlic, lemon, butter, peppers, and every good decision Camilla had forgotten to make for herself lately. She ate like a woman who had lived on vending machine almonds for 2 days, and Dante watched with an expression that was almost peaceful. "What?" she asked around a bite of bread. "Nothing." Men only say nothing when something is definitely happening in their heads. You enjoy food. That is not an observation. That is proof I am alive. Most people pick at their plates when they eat with me. Most people are scared you will murder them between courses. And you? Camilla dipped bread into sauce and considered lying. "I am scared," she said finally. Dante became very still. She looked at him directly. "I am not stupid. I know what you are. I know what standing near you can cost. But I am more scared of men like Raphael deciding poor people, wounded people, desperate people are pieces on a board. I have spent my whole life watching important men make decisions that land on bodies they never see. At least with you, I can yell at the source." Dante's eyes darkened. "You should not have to. And yet here we are." He leaned back slightly, but his gaze stayed fixed on her. "I do not want you hurt because of me." Camilla's laugh was small and tired. "That is the problem with men like you. You think because danger came in your car, it belongs only to you. My clinic was already in danger before you arrived. Maybe not from Raphael, but from bills, from shortages, from people treating survival like a luxury item. Your war is louder, Dante. It is not the first one I have fought." He was quiet after that, not because he had no answer. Because, for once, he seemed to understand that an answer would not fix anything. They ate in that strange silence, and it was not empty. It had rain against the windows, old jazz from the kitchen speaker, the clink of Camilla's fork, the low hum of Dante's phone, vibrating again and again, while he ignored it for almost 12 whole minutes. She pretended not to notice. He pretended not to notice her noticing. Then, just as dessert arrived, his phone buzzed with a different tone. He picked it up, read the message, and the warmth left his face. Camilla set down her spoon. "What happened?" Dante stood. "One of mine is missing." Her stomach tightened. "Wounded?" "Probably." "Where?" He looked at her, and she saw the argument before he spoke. The protective instinct, the calculation, the desire to put her somewhere safe and go handle the blood without her. Camilla stood too. "Do not make the face." "What face?" "The face where you decide my life is easier if I am not consulted." Dante's voice turned harder. "This is not a clinic call. Is there a wounded person?" "Yes." "Then it is exactly a clinic call." "Camilla." Her name sounded different this time, like warning, like plea. She stepped closer. "You asked for a doctor you could trust." "Trust goes both ways, Costa. You do not get to use my hands and ignore my brain." 10 minutes later, she was in the back of Dante's car, with her medical bag on her lap, Leo beside her, looking deeply unhappy, and Dante across from her, silent as the city blurred past in streaks of wet light. They found the missing man in an abandoned laundry warehouse near the river, barely conscious, tied to a chair, bleeding from a shallow wound that had been made to look worse than it was. Too obvious, too theatrical. Camilla felt it before Dante said anything. "This is bait," she whispered. Dante's eyes moved through the shadows. Leo lifted his gun. The wounded man groaned. Camilla's body pulled toward him anyway, because bait still bled. She reached him, cut the restraints with trauma shears, and pressed gauze to the wound while Dante's men swept the room. The man's eyelids fluttered. "Doc," he breathed. She did not know him. He knew her. That scared her more than the blood. "Who told you to come here?" she asked softly. His lips trembled. "They said he'd come if they used one of us." Dante turned sharply. "Who?" The man's eyes rolled toward Camilla. "Not him," he whispered. "Her." The lights went out. The warehouse dropped into black so complete, Camilla heard her own breath before she heard the guns. Dante's hand closed around her wrist, firm but not painful, and pulled her behind him as the first shot cracked through the dark. This time, she did not yell at him for moving her. This time, she felt the bullet pass close enough to disturb the air where her face had been, and for one terrifying second, all her clever words disappeared. Dante shoved her behind a concrete pillar and stood in front of her again, a shadow against shadows, his gun in his hand, his body between hers and the room. Leo's voice cut through the darkness. Men moved. Glass broke. Someone shouted. Camilla dropped to her knees beside the wounded man and kept pressure on his injury because fear did not excuse her from work. Dante looked back once, just long enough for their eyes to meet. There was no smile now. No banter. No careful, almost softness. Only the truth both of them had been avoiding, standing in the dark with bullets between them. Raphael Voss had not been hunting Dante's men anymore. He had started hunting Dante's doctor. Raphael Voss had not been hunting Dante's men anymore. He had started hunting Dante's doctor. Camilla understood it in the dark of the warehouse before anyone said the words out loud, before Leo cursed from somewhere near the broken windows, before Dante fired twice into the black and pulled her father behind the concrete pillar with one arm locked across her shoulders. It was not a gentle hold, but it was not careless either. It was the kind of hold a man used when the world had narrowed to one thought, and that thought was keep her breathing. Camilla hated that she noticed. She hated that even with gunfire cracking through the room and dust raining down from the ceiling, some foolish part of her brain still had time to register the heat of Dante's body in front of hers, the sharp scent of rain and smoke on his coat, the way his breath stayed steady while every other sound in the warehouse became chaos. "Stay down," Dante said. Camilla looked at the wounded man bleeding beside her knees. "I am literally already on the floor. Camilla, do not say my name in that tragic voice. It makes me want to argue harder." A bullet hit the pillar above them. Concrete dust sprayed into her hair. That shut her up for about 2 full seconds, which was impressive for everyone involved. Dante shifted, fired again, and the room answered with a shout from the far side. Leo moved through the dark like a myth with a gun, quiet until he was suddenly not. Camilla could hear him giving orders to Dante's men, short and sharp, while the wounded bait on the floor shook under her hands. She pressed harder against his side and leaned close to his ear. "You have a name?" she whispered. "Marco," he breathed. "Okay, Marco. Tonight is terrible, but you are not dying in an abandoned laundry warehouse because that is ugly, and I have standards." He gave a weak, broken laugh that turned into a cough. Dante glanced back. "Can he move?" Camilla checked the bleeding by touch because the emergency light had gone out and her small flashlight had rolled somewhere beneath old machines. The wound was shallow enough to be intentional, deep enough to scare him, messy enough to pull her in. Raphael had known exactly how much blood would make a doctor run toward a trap. "He can move if someone carries him," she said. "I'll take him," Leo called from the dark. "Do not drag him like luggage," Camilla snapped. A pause. Then Leo said, "Understood." Even in the dark, even with bullets flying, the man sounded offended. Dante's hand found Camilla's wrist. "When I say move, you move with me. If you pull my shoulder out, I am billing you." Triple? Emotionally, yes. There it was again, the smallest impossible breath from him. Not quite a laugh, not even close to peace, but enough to remind her that they were still themselves under the fear. Then Dante said, "Now." They moved. Dante rose first, covering her with his body, as Leo lifted Marco with surprising care. Camilla kept one hand clamped over Marco's wound, while half running, half stumbling through the dark behind Dante. The warehouse smelled like mold, oil, and old river water. Men shouted from the upper level. Someone fired from the metal stairs. Dante turned, shot the chain on a hanging light fixture, and the heavy frame crashed down in a shower of sparks. The sudden brightness revealed 3 men ducking behind crates near the loading bay, and the black mouth of an exit beyond them. "Leo," Dante said, "I see it. I hate when men have secret action conversations with 2 words," Camilla muttered, breathless. Dante pushed open the side door, and cold river air slapped them hard. Rain had started again, thinner now, meaner, falling sideways under the wind. 2 cars waited near the alley, engines running. Leo loaded Marco into the back of one. Camilla climbed in after him because she did not trust anyone in this group to remember that blood pressure mattered. Dante got in across from her, still holding his gun low, eyes on the doorway until the car lurched forward. Only when they were moving did Camilla see the blood on his side. Not a lot, not yet, but enough. She stared. Dante followed her gaze. "It's nothing." Camilla's face went blank. "You are one of those." "One of what?" "Men who say it's nothing while leaking." It grazed me. Fantastic. The bullet was polite. Leo looked at Dante. "Boss." "I said it's fine. And I am saying take off your coat before I cut it off," Camilla snapped. Dante looked at her for one long second. Then, with visible irritation, and something that looked dangerously close to obedience, he opened his coat. The bullet had torn through his shirt along his ribs. It was not deep, but it was bleeding freely. Camilla reached for her bag and worked in the unsteady light of the car, one hand still checking Marco, the other pressing gauze against Dante's side. "You got shot because you stepped in front of me," she said. "Yes, that was not praise." "I did not hear praise. You are impossible. You have said worse. I am saving the better material for when you stop bleeding on my hands." He looked down at her fingers against his side, then back at her face. The car passed beneath streetlights, and each one cut across his eyes for less than a second. Dark, tired, focused, and something else now. Something stripped bare by danger. He was no longer hiding it well. Maybe he had stopped trying. "I will not apologize for keeping you alive," he said. Camilla's hands slowed. She should have given him a sharp answer. She had several ready. She almost used one, but the words turned heavy in her mouth. The truth was simple and inconvenient. A bullet had passed where her face had been. Dante had moved before thought, before strategy, before pride. He had protected her the way he protected his men, with his body first and explanations later. So she pressed the gauze harder. Dante inhaled through his teeth. "There," she said softly. "That is for worrying me." His eyes held hers. The car went quiet. Then Marco groaned from the seat beside her, and the spell broke before it could become something neither of them knew how to name. They returned to the clinic just before dawn. The plywood over the broken front window rattled in the wind, and the sign outside still flickered weakly, stubbornly, as if even electricity had decided to stay on out of spite. Miguel opened the back door with a broom in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. Camilla stared at him. What exactly was the plan? "I had options," Miguel said. "You had a broom and a knife. 2 options." Maribel rushed in behind him and took one look at Dante's blood-stained shirt. "Oh my God. He is being dramatic," Camilla said. Dante looked at her. "I said it was nothing. Yes, and that was your first act of theater." They got Marco onto a table. Dante tried to stay standing while Camilla worked, but she pointed to the second stool without even looking at him. "Sit, or I will ask Leo to emotionally support your knees." Leo nodded once. "I can." Dante sat. By the time the sun rose, Marco was stable. Dante's side was stitched. Nico had woken long enough to ask if this meant he was still the favorite patient, and Camilla's clinic had officially become the strangest medical facility in Chicago. Criminals whispered in the waiting room. Nurses moved around armed men like they were badly placed furniture. Leo handed Camilla instruments before she asked for them. Dante stayed near the back wall with his shirt half-buttoned and his patience fully ruined. Camilla knew the look on his face. She had seen it on doctors after losing a patient, on mothers after the ambulance pulled away, on men who thought control could be rebuilt by making one large decision very quickly. Sure enough, he waited until she stepped into the supply room, then followed her in and closed the door. "No," she said. He had not spoken yet. Dante's eyebrows lowered. "You don't know what I'm going to say. You want me moved." His silence confirmed it. Camilla picked up a box of gloves and shoved it onto the shelf. "See? I can diagnose arrogance from across a room. Raphael knows where you are. Raphael has known where I am since the window. He planned tonight for you. Not Nico, not Marco. You." "Yes, that part was creepy. I am adding it to the invoice. This is not a joke." "No, but if I stop joking, I may start screaming, and nobody has time for that." Dante stepped closer, then stopped himself, as if he had remembered the terms before crossing an invisible line. That stopped her too, because he remembered, even now, even afraid, even angry enough to make the walls feel smaller. He remembered. "My penthouse has security," he said. "Medical space can be arranged. Equipment can be brought in. You would be safer there." "Safer," she repeated. "Yes." "And my clinic? My people can guard it. My patients. We can transport." "No, Camilla, no." This time her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. "You do not get to turn my clinic into an empty shell because Raphael scared you." Dante's jaw tightened. "He did more than scare me." "I know. You almost died. I know. If I had been 1 second slower, but you weren't." Her voice softened despite herself. "Dante, you weren't." He looked away then, and for the first time since she had met him, Camilla saw something close to fear move openly across his face. Not fear of death. She doubted death impressed him much. This was worse. This was the fear of imagining another body on the floor and knowing he would carry the blame like a second spine. Camilla set the gloves down. "You do not get to make me disappear because you care about me," she said. His eyes returned to hers. There. The word had landed. Care. It stood between them in the supply room, surrounded by bandages, saline, and enough tension to make even the shelves seem nosy. Dante's voice was low. "And if I do?" Camilla's heartbeat changed. "Then learn to do it without building a cage." He was silent. She took a breath and reached for the legal pad sitting on the small counter. "You want me safer? Fine. Then we build something useful. Not a hiding place. Not a pretty room where I sit quietly while men decide what happens outside. A medical wing. Real equipment. Backup power. Surgical lights that do not flicker when Miguel insults them. Secure entry. Staff housing if needed. Supply storage. Recovery beds. And it treats your people and mine. Yours? My clinic does not stop being my clinic because it gets walls with a view. You want this in my penthouse. I want it somewhere Raphael cannot break the window with a phone call and a bad attitude." Dante stared at her. Camilla lifted the pen. "Also, I want the terms in writing." That almost smile returned, but it was sadder now, softer around the edges. "You trust paper," he said. "I trust people who sign paper when it limits them." Dante looked at the page. "Write it. So she did. She wrote while the clinic woke around them, while Maribel checked vitals, while Leo made phone calls in a voice that made delivery drivers suddenly very motivated, while Nico flirted badly with a nurse and immediately fell asleep halfway through his own sentence, while Dante stood beside Camila in the supply room and watched her build a future he had never known how to imagine. A place inside his fortress that was not for planning violence, counting money, or hiding fear. A place for keeping people alive. By noon, Dante's lawyers had the draft. By 3, engineers had measured one of the upper penthouse floors. By evening, Camila stood in Dante Costa's private elevator with her arms folded, still in scrubs, carrying a medical bag and an expression that dared anyone to call this romantic. His penthouse was exactly as annoying as she expected. Too large, too quiet, too much glass. Chicago stretched below in silver and gold, the lake dark beneath a bruised sky, the buildings rising like secrets with lights in their ribs. The living room alone could have swallowed her entire clinic, and still had space left over for rich people to feel lonely. Camila looked around and made a sound. Dante, beside her, said, "What? Your apartment has villain acoustics." Leo coughed into his fist. Dante ignored him. "This way." He led her down a hall past closed doors, armed security, and windows that did not rattle in storms because apparently some buildings had self-respect. At the end of the hall was an empty floor already being cleared. Workers moved furniture. Men carried boxes. Electricians marked walls. Someone had rolled in temporary medical beds, still wrapped in plastic. Camila stopped in the center of the room. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, grief rose so suddenly that she almost lost her breath, because this was what money could do in hours, not months of begging, not grant applications, not humiliating meetings with donors who loved sad stories but hated budgets. Hours, a phone call, a signature. A man with power deciding a thing should happen, and then it happened. Dante saw her face. Of course he did. "What is it?" he asked. Camila shook her head. "Nothing. Do not insult me." She laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You stole my line." He waited. Camila looked at the wide, clean space, the strong walls, the private elevator, the secure doors, the city beneath them like a patient under glass. "I have kept people alive with expired supplies and favors. I have begged for medicine from hospitals that throw away more in a week than I could buy in a year. And now your men make one phone call, and suddenly there is space, equipment, power, safety." She swallowed. "It makes me angry." "At me?" "At everything." Dante stepped beside her, not too close. "Use it." She looked at him. He nodded toward the room. "Your anger has been building a clinic with broken tools. Let it build this one with better ones." Camila hated how good that sounded. "You are becoming dangerously useful," she said. "I have been told to try. By a brilliant woman, no doubt. By a loud one." She turned her head slowly. Dante looked straight ahead, but his mouth betrayed him. Camila smiled before she could stop herself. The medical wing took shape faster than any sane project should have. Dante's world moved illegally fast and beautifully well when properly terrified. Camila refused half of what he tried to add because she did not need Italian marble in a recovery room, and no patient in history had healed faster because a sink looked expensive. She argued with contractors, reorganized supply cabinets, tested backup generators, inspected every lock, and told Leo that if he wanted to be useful, he could learn how to set up sterile fields properly, instead of looming near doorways like a cursed wardrobe. Leo learned. Badly at first, then annoyingly well. Nico arrived 2 days later, still weak but determined to help, and immediately taped a handmade sign to the temporary nurses' station that said, "Doc Boss General Command." Camila removed it. He made another. She removed that one too. By the 4th sign, Dante had it framed. Camila stared at the frame on the wall. Take it down. No. I am your doctor. I know where your stitches are. Dante looked at her calmly. It improves morale. It improves Nico's ego. Nico, from a recovery bed, raised one hand. Also morale. Maribel, who had agreed to split her hours between the old clinic and the new wing after Dante offered salaries that made her sit down for several minutes, laughed from the medication cabinet. Miguel called the place too clean and immediately claimed control over the coffee maker. By the end of the week, the penthouse medical wing smelled less like expensive paint and more like antiseptic, coffee, warm food, and people trying very hard not to die. But Raphael did not wait quietly while Camila built something he could not easily break. He adapted. The first message came through an old patient's phone. A photo of Camila leaving the clinic 2 years earlier, before Dante, before Nico, before armored cars and midnight wars. The second came as a delivery box, with no return address, filled with broken glass and a white coat cut down the middle. The third came through a wounded man who stumbled into the old clinic with a note pinned inside his jacket. Dante read it once and turned so cold the room seemed to lose heat. Camila took it from his hand. The note said, "Doctors choose who lives. So do kings." Camila looked at it for a long moment. Then she said, "He is very committed to being dramatic." Dante did not smile. This ends now. This time, Camila did not argue. Because he was right. Raphael had made the same mistake men like him always made. He thought a doctor was valuable only because of her hands. He saw Camila as a tool, a prize, a weak place in Dante's armor. He did not understand that a clinic hears things. Patients talk when they are scared. Nurses hear names. Drivers remember corners. Wounded men describe where they were hit, what they smelled, what song was playing, what kind of floor they fell on. Pain leaves clues, and Camila had been reading pain all her life. So while Dante prepared soldiers, Camila prepared a map. Not of territory, of wounds. She spread patient files, blood reports, injury patterns, and delivery routes across Dante's conference table, ignoring the shocked faces of men who were used to maps with guns and money on them. She pointed at 3 neighborhoods, then 4 warehouses, then a medical supply company Raphael had quietly purchased through a shell business. "Here," she said, "he has a doctor." Dante's eyes sharpened. "How do you know?" "These stitches." She tapped photos from 3 different wounded men. Same hand, same mistake. Whoever is treating Raphael's people uses too much tension near the edges. It leaves this little fold. See? Bad technique. Arrogant. Consistent. Also, they keep using the same cheap antiseptic that smells like fake orange. 2 patients mentioned it. One of yours said the warehouse where he was held smelled like oranges and rust. Leo looked at the map. Orange antiseptic? Mock it and bleed elsewhere. I am not mocking. You were spiritually close. Dante leaned over the table. Where? Camila circled a block near an old private surgical center that had closed during the pandemic and never reopened. Here, it has ambulance access, old generators, underground parking, and a loading dock. Also, Raphael's men keep getting treated too quickly after fights on this side of the city. Unless he has magic, he has a hidden medical base. Dante looked at her for a long time. "What?" she asked. "You just found Raphael's safest location through stitches and bad cleaning fluid." "Yes?" His eyes warmed in a way that made the room feel briefly private, despite the 8 dangerous men watching them. "Terrifying woman." Camilla's chin lifted. "Correct." The plan came together around her discovery. Dante would not attack blindly. That was what Raphael expected. Rage, bullets, a loud response. Instead, Dante used Camilla's medical map to cut off Raphael's hidden safety. Supply trucks were redirected. Drivers were paid to disappear for a night. Power to the old surgical center was interrupted at the exact moment Raphael's men expected a wounded convoy. Dante's people moved through the city quietly, blocking routes, turning allies, offering something Raphael had forgotten mattered. care. Men who had been told Dante would abandon them when wounded were shown a clean medical wing, beds, medicine, nurses, food, and Camilla Rossi walking between them with a clipboard and a voice sharp enough to make fear sit up straight. By dawn, 3 of Raphael's smaller crews had switched sides without firing a shot. "Dead men don't follow kings," Nico said quietly from his bed when he heard the news. Camilla adjusted his blanket. "Living men follow whoever shows up when they are bleeding." The final blow did not come in a grand ballroom or a burning street. It came in the old surgical center Raphael thought no one had found. Dante went there before sunrise with Leo and a small team. Camilla was supposed to stay in the penthouse medical wing. She did not. Technically, she stayed until the first call came in that Dante had been hit. Then she moved with such speed and fury that Miguel stepped out of her way before she even spoke. Leo's voice came through the phone, rough and strained. "He is conscious." "Where?" "Camilla." "Where, Leo?" A pause. Then he told her. The drive to the surgical center felt unreal. Chicago was gray and half awake, the streets wet, the sky pale at the edges. Maribel rode beside her with 2 trauma bags. Miguel came too because, in his words, he had a broom, a knife, and growth potential. Camilla did not have time to argue. They reached the surgical center as Dante's men secured the lower entrance. The building looked dead from outside, all dark windows and rusted signs. But inside it smelled exactly as Camilla expected. Fake orange, rust, blood. She found Dante in what had once been a recovery room. He was sitting against the wall, one hand pressed to his upper chest, shirt soaked dark beneath his fingers. Leo stood beside him, face carved from stone and guilt. Raphael Voss knelt across the room with 2 of Dante's men holding him, his perfect suit torn, his smooth face bruised but still smiling. Camilla ignored Raphael completely. She dropped to her knees in front of Dante. His eyes met hers. "I told them not to call you," he said. Camilla stared at him. "That is the worst opening sentence you could have chosen. It looks worse than it is. If you say it's nothing, I will let Maribel sedate you for personality repair." Maribel, already opening the trauma bag, said, "I brought options." Dante's mouth twitched, then tightened with pain. Camilla cut his shirt open. The bullet had entered high, near the shoulder, dangerously close but not fatal if the bleeding stayed controlled. Her fear tried to rise again, big and black and useless. She pushed it down and let her hands take over. "Pressure here. Maribel, line. Leo, stop looking like a guilty statue and hold the light." Leo moved instantly. Dante watched her face as she worked. "You came." "Yes, I am starting to think that is my worst habit." Raphael laughed from across the room, touching. Camilla did not turn. If the villain section could remain quiet while adults are working, that would be wonderful. His smile sharpened. "You think he sees you as equal? He will keep you until you become inconvenient. Men like Dante collect useful things." Dante's eyes went cold enough to kill, but Camilla pressed one bloody hand against his chest and kept him still. Then she looked at Raphael. Really looked. He was handsome, in a polished, empty way. The kind of man who expected fear to arrive before he finished speaking. The kind of man who had mistaken cruelty for intelligence because it had worked on people who could not afford to fight back. "You used wounded men as bait," Camilla said. Raphael shrugged lightly. "And you came every time." "Yes." Her voice softened, and that somehow made the room quieter. "That is what you never understood." His smile faded a little. Camilla turned back to Dante and resumed working. "People like you think caring is weakness because you only understand leverage. But every man you hurt remembered who left him bleeding and who came to stop it. That is why you lost." Raphael's face changed. Just enough. Dante saw it. Leo saw it. Every man in the room felt it. The war had not ended because Dante was feared. It ended because Raphael had made his people afraid of being abandoned, and Camilla had given them proof that they did not have to be. Dante's men took Raphael away before sunrise. Camilla did not ask where. She was a doctor, not a priest, judge, or fool. She only said that nobody was allowed to bleed on the stairs because she had done enough mopping in this lifetime. Dante was moved to the penthouse medical wing under protest. His protest lasted exactly 8 seconds before Camilla reminded him she had anesthesia and unresolved rage. He recovered badly, not physically. Physically, he healed faster than she expected and complained less than he deserved credit for. Emotionally, he was a nightmare. He tried to hold meetings from bed. He tried to stand too soon. He told Leo to move a security briefing into the recovery room, and Camilla responded by unplugging the room's main screen and handing him broth. "I run an organization," Dante said. "You currently run a fever if you annoy me." "I do not have a fever. You have the vibe of one." Nico laughed so hard from the next bed that Maribel threatened his stitches. The old clinic stayed open, but it changed. Dante repaired the window, the roof, the door, the plumbing, the sign, and yes, the van. Camilla kept the van even after he bought a second one, because the old one had survived a Mafia car and deserved respect. The new penthouse wing became the secret place for emergencies too dangerous for public hospitals, but Camilla made sure it also served the people who had been walking through her clinic door long before Dante arrived. Cash patients, uninsured patients, tired mothers, delivery drivers, men with no papers, women with no one listening, kids with asthma, old people who brought soup as payment and scolded Dante's guards for blocking the hallway. Dante's men adjusted, mostly because Camilla forced them to. Leo became the official head of security and unofficial keeper of supply drawers. He still looked terrifying, but now old women asked him to reach things from high shelves, and he did it with the solemn dignity of a man moving priceless art. Nico recovered, gained weight, and remained devoted to Camilla, with the embarrassing loyalty of a golden retriever who had seen combat. Miguel ruled the coffee maker from the penthouse like a tiny, underpaid king. Maribel ran the nurses with such calm authority that even Dante lowered his voice when she was doing med counts. And Dante changed too, not into a gentleman. Camilla would have distrusted that. The world did not turn wolves into house pets because a woman kissed them. Dante remained dangerous. Men still lowered their voices when his name entered a room. Enemies still stepped carefully around his shadow. But now, sometimes, before he made a brutal decision, his eyes moved toward the medical wing, toward the beds, toward the people who would pay the cost in flesh. Sometimes he changed the plan. Sometimes he asked Camilla what she saw. Sometimes he listened before the damage happened. That mattered. It mattered more than pretty words. The night Camilla officially moved part of her clinic into the penthouse medical wing, it rained again. Not like the first storm, this rain was softer, silver against the windows, turning Chicago into a blur of light below. Boxes lined the hallway. Her old desk stood beside the new nurse's station, scratched, dented, and completely out of place among all the expensive surfaces. Dante had asked once if she wanted a new one. She had looked at him until he said, "The old desk stays." Smart man. Camilla stood alone near the wide window, holding a mug of coffee, watching the city she had fought for all her life. Behind her, the wing hummed with quiet life. A patient slept behind curtain 3. Maribel laughed softly at something Miguel said. Nico was arguing with Leo about whether Doc Boss needed a theme song. Someone had taped the framed sign higher on the wall, where Camilla could not reach it without a step stool, which meant there would be consequences. Dante came to stand beside her. "Not too close. Close enough. You're quiet," he said. "I am enjoying the terrifying possibility that my roof will not leak tonight. I can arrange leaking if it helps you feel at home." She turned her head. Romance is alive. His mouth curved. For a while they watched the rain, then Dante said, "This place is yours." Camilla looked around the medical wing, at the lights, the beds, the staff, the supplies, the guards outside the doors, the people inside who were alive because it existed. It is ours. Something in him stilled. Camilla took a breath. She had faced blood, bullets, hospital boards, broken vans, Raphael Voss, and Dante Costa with a head wound, but this was harder in a ridiculous way. This quiet, this choice, this standing beside a man powerful enough to offer cages and disciplined enough, finally, to hand her keys instead. "I am not here because you protected me," she said. "I know. I am not here because you paid for equipment. I know. I am not here because your apartment has villain acoustics and excellent water pressure. That one surprises me." She smiled despite herself. "I am here because this works, because my people are safer. Because your people are less stupid when they have medical supervision. Because we built something better out of a very bad night." She looked at him fully. "And because I want to be." Dante's expression changed slowly, carefully, like a man approaching something more dangerous than any enemy he had ever faced. "You want to be?" he asked. Camilla set her mug down. "Do not make me repeat emotional material. I am new to this." He stepped closer, stopping just in front of her, still asking without words, still waiting. That was why she reached for him, not because he took, because he did not. Her fingers brushed the front of his shirt, just above the scar she had stitched herself. "You know," she said, "for a feared Mafia boss, you require a lot of maintenance." His hand came up slowly, settling at her waist only after she did not move away. "Your invoices suggest you enjoy it." "My invoices suggest you are expensive. And you?" "I am priceless, obviously." This time, his smile was real. Camilla rose onto her toes and kissed him, before either of them could ruin it with another argument. Dante went still for half a second, as if the softness shocked him more than pain ever had. Then his hand tightened gently at her waist, his other hand lifting to her cheek with a care so precise it almost hurt. He kissed her like a man who knew power and chose restraint, like a man who had spent his life owning rooms and had finally found a woman he only wanted to be invited by. Behind them someone whispered, "Finally." Camilla broke the kiss and turned. Nico pointed weakly at Leo. He said it. Leo stared straight ahead. I said nothing. Maribel smiled into a chart. Miguel suddenly became fascinated by the coffee filters. Dante looked at his men. The room snapped into innocent silence. Camilla laughed. Not a small laugh, not a tired one. A full, warm, startled laugh that filled the medical wing and made Dante look at her like he would remember the sound in every dark room for the rest of his life. Later, when the patients were settled and the rain had softened against the windows, Camilla walked through the wing one last time before midnight. She checked monitors, adjusted blankets, corrected Nico's terrible handwriting on the supply log, and found Leo restocking gauze with unsettling perfection. Dante waited near the entrance, one shoulder against the wall, watching without rushing her. The old clinic sign had been brought upstairs and mounted near the inner door. It still only lit up halfway. Clin, stubborn as ever, Dante had offered to fix it. Camilla had said no. Some broken things became history when they survived long enough. She stopped beneath the sign and looked back at him. "You know this does not mean I work for you." Dante's eyes softened. "I know. And it does not mean your men get priority over Mrs. Alvarez and her grandson. I know. And if you bleed on my floor again, I am charging triple. I would expect nothing less." Camilla studied him, this dangerous man who had crashed into her alley with blood, trouble, and a dying boy, and somehow stayed long enough to become part of the place, instead of owning it. Dante Costa still won loyalty through fear when he had to. Camilla Rossi won it by showing up with steady hands when the world had already decided someone was disposable. Together, they had become something Raphael Voss had never understood. Not a king and his doctor, not a monster and his weakness, a blade and a needle. One ending the war. One keeping their side alive. At midnight, Dante opened the door to the medical wing and waited for her to walk through first. Camila noticed. Of course she noticed. She walked past him with her chin high, her scrubs wrinkled, her body tired, her heart annoyingly full, and her clinic alive behind her. Then she glanced back. Costa? Yes? Try being useful and bring my coffee. Dante looked at her for one quiet, shining second. Then the most feared man in Chicago picked up her mug without argument and followed her home.